Oh, the one thing, Melissa, is there like a particular Canada or something you want?
They're embedded in the slideshow. I actually like put the YouTube videos in.
Oh, okay, cool. All right.
The Western song is from the Western Marching Band. It does have lyric text, so if you just want to have us read it, whatever you want to do.
Okay, sounds good. All right, it is 10:04 and I'll call the meeting to order. And we will start with the land recognition. Sorry, I have too many tabs. Are the slides moving for everybody?
They're moving, Megan, but they're not in presentation mode.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Okay. All right, so we acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. With this, we respect the long-standing relationships that Indigenous nations have to this land as they are the original caretakers. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada, and we accept responsibility as a public institution to contribute towards revealing and correcting miseducation, as well as renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through our teaching, research, and community service. We also acknowledge that we are not all on the same territory tonight and encourage everyone to spend some time learning about the territory on which you are currently living. If I do that, can you guys hear it? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. All right, so now we'll do attendance. So if you can go on to your clickers, I'll give you guys a minute to do your attendance on Turning Point.
I know there's a couple people who have messaged me about having a hard time logging into Turning Point. If there's anyone else who's having an issue, can you let me know? We've got 26 people logged in. And 46 people on the call. And I know some of those people are not voting on the call, but that seems, session ID is here. I'll put it in the chat again.
Melissa, can you just let me know when we're like pretty close to?
Right now I have 28 people logged in and 26 people who have responded. Oh, 30 people are logged in. 28 responded. So it looks like we're just waiting for 2 more people to respond at this point.
Okay. All right, we'll give them a couple minutes and then we'll get going. Okay, we can keep going and then those last couple can just finish up. All right, so we can move on to comments from the chair. So the only thing I have tonight is just for debate or like throughout the meeting, if you have any motions, please just take yourself off mute and make sure you say your name really loudly so I know who's talking. If you want to contribute to debate or if you have any questions or any other issues. And we can move on to
Sorry, Megan.
Yeah.
How do you want them to signal they want to go on the speakers list?
Well, you can. I commented the speakers list on the agenda there. And then maybe the chat might be easiest.
Okay.
Is that okay, Melissa? Are you able to transfer it from the chat to the doc I commented?
Yeah, it's easiest if you want, though, just if you want to go on the speakers list, please put it to everyone. rather than just to me, because I find the messages get lost really easily. So just if you share with everyone, that's easiest. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Also, Brandon raised his hand.
I just had a question. How do you want us to handle points of personal privilege or something like that?
You can just interrupt, just say your name, just say counselor, like whatever, and just go right ahead, and then we'll address that right away. So just
you very
take
much.
yourself off mute and we'll get it sorted out right away. All right. Okay, so if everybody's okay with that, then we can move on to approving the agenda. Can I get a mover in favor of approving the agenda? Or I guess, sorry, are there any changes to the agenda?
Sorry, Megan, I don't know if you can see my hand, but it's Matt.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Sorry, I just put that
You don't
up.
need to raise your hand, just talk.
Yeah, it's all good. I wanted a motion to add a 10-minute presentation on our student survey that the USC conducted.
Okay, can I get a seconder?
I can second that.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Petch. All right, is anybody opposed? Are there any objections to adding a 10-minute presentation on the survey to the agenda? Okay, if there are no objections, then we can add. Sorry, we can fix the formatting on the agenda in a second. Are there any other amendments to the agenda?
And I might add one more, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I wanted to motion, and I don't know if this has to be a proper motion for this, but in regard to John Lewis's recent death, I was hoping for us to take a moment of silence, and I don't know whether we want to pass that as a motion or if we're okay to just do that now. I'm not sure on the exact procedure you want to take on that, but just in order to recognize his immense contribution to the civil rights movement, and particularly for his work to address racial segregation and anti-Black racism, if that is all right with everyone.
Are there any objections to, we could just do the moment of silence once we're done approving the agenda?
Sounds
If
great.
everybody's okay with that, if there's no objections? Okay, perfect. We can do that after approving the agenda then. Are there any other amendments? All right. Can I get a mover in favor of approving the agenda?
Counselor Ali.
Thank you. And can I get a seconder?
Counselor Beltran.
Thank you. Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Okay, perfect. Then we can, we can do the minute of silence. Matt, if there's anything you want to say, you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, and as I said before, the only thing I just wanted to preface with was I just think, obviously we saw in our chat, and I think it was a great flag by Antonio, and I'm sure I know others were obviously aware of the tragic passing, but I just thought it was important for us to take the silence, just, yeah, as I had mentioned before, in order to recognize his immense contributions to, as we all know, to the civil rights movement and addressing racial segregation in the U.S. So with that, if we can just take a moment of silence with that, that'd be amazing. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, thank you guys. Sorry, I'm a bit behind on the slides. We'll keep going here. All right, so we can approve the minutes now from the April meeting. Can I get a mover in favor of approving these minutes?
Counselor Ali.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder?
Counselor Katadia.
Counselor Lee. Oh,
Thank you. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? All right, if there's no objections, then we can move on to our presentation section. Sorry, just give me one sec. I'm going to share different slides. All right, can everybody see the blue slides? All right, perfect. Okay, so this presentation is on, just to give you guys a bit more context on a motion that's coming up. The Governance and Finance Committee, Ryan and Mark and myself, have been debating these changes, and we wanted to make sure that everybody had a really thorough understanding so that you are able to make it a very informed choice when you vote on the motion. So that's kind of the purpose behind the presentation. So on the proposed changes, we'll start with a quick review of the current policy. So this is the current counselor accountability and discipline policy. So you can just quickly skim that just to refresh your memory. So this is the first part. And these are the other bits here. So basically, if you miss 2 meetings, you get a warning. And if you fail to attend a 3rd meeting, the policy outlines what goes on here. And this is the last part of the relevant section of the policy. All right, so now we can move on to the proposed changes that Councillor Baldwin is bringing. Okay, so what was wrong with the previous policy? So what sparked these changes was feeling that step 3 is a bit lenient in some cases. So it permits a counselor who has missed 4 meetings with regrets to remain on council until they miss a 5th meeting. And one thing we kind of figured out last year was that by the time somebody's missed 5 meetings, it's really hard to train a new person and bring them in and give them a fair shot at being a good representative for their constituents. So this is one part that the proposed changes aim to address. And the second part was that step 2 is too harsh in some cases. So a counselor who has missed 3 meetings or left early and hasn't submitted regrets for each of these meetings would be dismissed if their written rationale does not meet the standard of extraordinary and unavoidable. So that's a pretty high bar to meet. And we recognize that everybody's a student and they have other commitments. So this is one thing the proposed changes also aim to target. So the changes aim to reward counselors who make an effort to ensure that their constituents' interests are represented by a proxy in their absence. Reward counselors who demonstrate a commitment to council by communicating with the speaker and making arrangements in advance. Hold counselors accountable who have poor attendance before it's too late in the term to do anything meaningful. And create a clear standard for counselors that holds them accountable while also keeping in mind counselors are students and have other obligations. All right, so The step 1 and step 2 from the previous policy will remain the same in the motion. And then step 2, this is where the changes start to come in. So the changes, the most significant change here is that sending a proxy for 2 or more of the meetings. So it adds in this qualifier so that counselors are making sure that they're giving the representation for their constituents, whether they're there or not. So the yellow highlighted part is the part that would be changed. So if you fail to attend 3 meetings without sending a proxy for 2 or more, then it follows these steps. And if you fail to attend a meeting, but you send a proxy for 2 or more of these meetings, then the procedure is a little bit more lenient. So why we made these changes was so that counselors who are making that effort to get their constituents' representation and making sure that they're being responsible and communicating, they are rewarded for this behavior and for demonstrating that commitment to council and to their constituents. But if you're not demonstrating that commitment, then we're able to be a bit more strict in the attendance policy so that we're able to find a replacement if needed. And so then there are also changes follow through here. So if a counselor fails to attend 4 required meetings without sending a proxy for 3 or more, so it introduces that qualifier there as well. And the qualifier is also introduced here. So should a counselor fail to attend 4 required meetings but sends a proxy for 3 or more, then the treatment is a bit more lenient here because the counselor has demonstrated the commitment to council. All right, so the key changes to highlight, so an increased emphasis on sending a proxy to ensure constituents are receiving adequate representation, decreased tolerance for poor planning or failing to make arrangements to fulfill the responsibility that comes with the role of being a counselor, and changes aimed to reward dedicated counselors and remove disengaged counselors in enough time to find and train a replacement. So just to kind of give that replacement counselor a chance at having a meaningful term where they're able to kind of understand council and also make sure that their constituents are getting that representation. So, all right. And we can discuss that more when the motion comes up, but we just wanted to make sure that everybody has a thorough understanding of the proposed changes and what's changing from the previous policy, so you can make an informed decision. All right, thank you. Sorry, Matt, who was giving the survey presentation?
It's going to be Cam and Victoria.
Okay, Cam and Victoria, do you have a slideshow you want? Okay.
Yeah, Megan, I shared it with you in your inbox.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'll make it bigger.
No worries.
Okay. All right, is everybody able to see the slides?
Megan, it's on the email tab right now.
Oh, shoot, okay. Okay, how about now?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, wonderful. So good morning, everybody. So we are just here to present some of the preliminary findings of our COVID-19 student experience survey. So Vic and I worked on this survey a couple months back, and right now we're working on doing an in-depth analysis and doing some cross analysis of the results of the survey. But these are some of the key findings that we've found. Most of you would have seen in the council page that I posted. If you do want the results of the survey, or if you want a more extensive look at the report, please feel free to reach out to me or Vic, and we'd be happy to send it along to you. And yeah, we can just jump into it. So for some of your information, this survey was created for us to assess what the main student issues were surrounding the quality of education and the quality of student experience going into the school year. And some of our key findings found that students were most concerned about the quality of their academics, and they expressed a lot of importance about social life at university, expressing that they may not be able to connect with their peers in the same way in the COVID era.
Awesome, thanks, Kim. So just to overview the survey details for those of you who didn't see it, the survey was open from June 8th to the 22nd, and we received around 1,600 responses. We felt that it was important to do this survey because we hadn't really talked to students since their experience back in March had changed so drastically, as well as the university is doing a lot of planning, and there's a lot of obviously uncertainty around September, and so we wanted to gain some student feedback on how their experiences had gone in March, and then kind of what students would prefer to see in an ideal situation in September, so that we could push for those things or steer hopefully the university in the right direction come September. So that's kind of the rationale behind the survey. And then like Cam mentioned, if you are interested, I know some people reached out to Cam beforehand about getting the survey results, but if you didn't, please reach out to us and we can give that to you. We collected demographic data. So as Cam mentioned as well, we're also cross-referencing some of that data. So if you're interested in knowing the results for your constituents specifically, you can also get that information as well.
Great. So one of the biggest statistics that we found was that 80% of students found that their quality of student experience post-COVID was worse than pre-COVID. And we kind of narrowed it down to a couple of different factors. One of the main was due to a lot of turnover in terms of the way that classes were taught and the way that students were able to experience their student experiences and connect with their peers. And Victoria will speak a little bit more to some of the online learning experiences that students have had and some of the accessibility barriers that may have impacted students as they switched from pre-COVID to post-COVID.
Perfect, thanks, Kim. So like Kim mentioned, we wanted to understand kind of what the barriers were to students' education back in March. So with the changes and disruptions to online learning, we noted, or students noted rather in the survey, that they had decreased accessibility to online courses. This came mainly in the form of a lack of interest in online learning, largely due to the fact that a lot of students probably haven't done online learning before or taken online courses. However, the quality of professors' digital communication, as well as academic supports and internet connections were also barriers that we saw faced by students, and are things that we've been communicating to administration on, and that we've already started to see some changes, but definitely factors that are being really heavily considered now in the summer for September.
Another thing that we really wanted to address in the surveys was what the USC could do moving forward to really help support students. So one of the main things that we saw was academic support and ensuring that students had the resources that they needed to succeed in their academic life. So really making sure that we're pushing on quality of education and course delivery so that students are able to get the resources that they need to learn their course material and really engage with their academic experiences. Another thing that we heard a lot of was that students wanted increased updates from the USC about COVID. So that's something that we've been actively trying to do on our social media accounts and something that we've actively been trying to ensure that the university is doing as well on the communications front. And there are a couple of other things I would like to highlight is mental health resources and financial aid resources, which are two things that we've been pushing on in our advocacy and in our programming. So I know that Mark will dive a little bit more into changes to the health and dental plan, and Mackenzie and Victoria will dive a little bit more into their updates on financial aid resources for students and their executive updates. So these are things that we are considering when we're doing our advocacy and programming.
Awesome. So this statistic here indicates a couple of different questions that were cross-referenced from the survey. So the first question that we asked was what students' preferred method of assessment was. And so largely students chose in-person assessments and in-person just like course delivery in general. But then of those students that would prefer in-person courses, like the vast majority of them would also want to have online course options as well. So that's something we've noted to administration, that while students would prefer to learn online, obviously that's not something that is, I guess, possible come September given COVID and how it develops. So we want to make sure that we are giving students the option to have online courses and be flexible in those options as well.
One thing that we also wanted to assess was students' biggest concerns coming back to campus in fall 2020 and discussing how we can ease those concerns. So the biggest two factors were quality of education and course delivery, which is something that I know that Victoria has been having extensive conversations with administration about, and making sure that the supports are in place to ensure that students are able to get the same quality of education as they would pre-COVID, and making sure that course delivery and their engagement with professors is top quality. And then the other thing is social connectedness. We know that social connectedness is a big concern for students, and making sure that students are able to build relationships with their peers and really get that experience as they would on campus. And that's something that we're building out in our programming. So I'm sure that Hannah can speak to that a little bit more, but making sure that students are able to get a really solid student experience, whether they be on campus or whether they won't be on campus this year. So a blended model of doing digital programming as well as some in-person programming where possible.
Awesome. And one of the last questions that we asked on the survey, which is also kind of getting at what Cam already touched on, was we asked students what makes their Western student experience great. And this was something that we did for a number of reasons. We did for both our advocacy purposes, but also for our programming. We really wanted to get to the core of why students love being at Western and the things that really enhance and improve their, not only their academic experience, but their just like overall student life. And so based on the results of this question, we know that peer-to-peer connection was ranked #1. So students really are concerned about their social networks and being able to connect with their friends and their peers, as well as social activities and academic quality. So as Cam mentioned in the previous question, quality of education is something that I've been talking to administration a lot about, and there's been a lot of investments already. I'll talk about that in my executive update later. But the peer-to-peer connections and social activities is something that I know Hannah is working a lot on in really driving home what the core of our programming is trying to accomplish, so that we can ensure that we're not only providing like a safe experience and safe opportunities for students, but also ones that really address the root causes of like why students come to Western and what makes their student experience great. So I guess in summary, these are just the key findings of the survey. We're doing some more analysis, and we will be looking into like some cross-referencing of some of that data to look at it further. But we're happy to take any questions about things we touched on in the touched on in the presentation, or if there are things you wanted to know about the survey that we didn't touch on. Cam and I are happy to take questions now, or you feel free to message us or email us after as well.
If you have a question too, just go ahead and just say your name so Victoria and Cam know who to address.
Jenny, law counselor. I just had a question about the methodology for doing the survey. I actually don't remember if I filled it out. So I was wondering if you sent it out over email or it was through social media networks.
Yeah, absolutely. For promoting the survey, we did a mass email to all students, and then we also promoted across social media platforms, and we created graphics for faculty councils who were able to use our graphics and put their faculty council logo on it and promote it on their channels as well. Antonio, did you have a comment about the survey?
Yeah, I did. And I kind of put this forward with my with the nursing council as well. Is it at all possible to be able to separate the nursing students from the rest of the faculty of health sciences? Only because we are a professional undergraduate program, and the things that we go through are completely different from the rest of the faculty. And we've noticed that a couple of these surveys that are coming out, we're all just clumped up into one. So we're kind of concerned about being able to parse out the information that's specifically affecting us, so that we can use that information, taking it to our faculty.
For sure, Antonio, that's really good feedback, and that's definitely something that we'll consider next time. And in terms of health sciences, we can definitely send you the survey based on health science, but I hear your concerns about nursing students having very unique concerns. So that's definitely something that we'll keep in mind.
Thank you.
All right, we're reaching the end of our time, so I think we'll get back to our agenda if there's no other questions. Okay, perfect, thank you. We'll move on to our for action section. So first up from Governance and Finance, Councillor Baldwin, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, sure. So this was a motion, again, as you saw the presentation, Megan put forward. We worked with her and Mark to get this all sort of created ahead of time, as well as going to Governance and Finance. They had some notes, so we put those into work, and I think it's a great idea just to give it a little bit more accountability while, you know, promoting the idea that we are representatives for students on council. So we need to make sure that we're doing our best to represent them when we can, or finding someone who can be in our place. And the ultimate decision to you know, remove a counselor still rests with council. That doesn't change. So I think it's a really great way just to improve that overall process, so we don't have to get to the point where we have to kick somebody out of council.
Councillor Deagle, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think Councillor Baldwin did it, or spoke pretty well about it, so.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions about the motion? If you have a question, just feel free to interrupt and just say your name so we can. Okay, if there's no questions, then we can move on to debate. Are there any points of debate on the motion? Also, if you have like an issue like reading the slides, just let me know. Like just speak though, because I can't see the chat when I'm screen sharing. Okay, if there's no points of debate, then we can call to question. So you can go to Turning Point and vote. Melissa, can you just let me know when the results are in?
Yep, will do.
Thanks.
I'm just waiting on one more person at this point.
Okay. Whoop.
All right. Everyone has voted. The motion passes, but not unanimously. So 97% in favor, 3% abstained.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to our second motion here. Councillor Petch, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to participate in the creation of this motion through my positions on both the Orientation Advisory Board and the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. So this budget specifically this year highlights the importance of online programming and a blended format. So I'd like to defer my speaking rights to Vice President, Governance and Finance, St. Pierre.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I'll just quickly touch on it. It's gone through, so to speak on Emily's point, it's gone through advisory. And it's going to come through council again. Obviously, we already passed the budget, but this is just a few updates. The one big one I wanted to highlight just for you all, obviously went to governance finance, but the one big portion is the alternative programming line that's going to 95,000. I think it speaks to what Emily had mentioned, and also the app portion, that the online platform portion is going to 50,000. Those are the kind of the two big changes that you'll notice about the actual budget. It kind of addresses what we've been shifting towards within the planning of orientation. Obviously, I worked a lot with Hannah on this to better understand maybe where the priorities are laying for OE 2020, but I'm open to any questions that anybody might have about it.
Just before we get to questions, Councillor Kitching, did you want to speak to the motion?
I guess I'll just briefly say that I think it makes a lot of sense to be reevaluating what the orientation budget looks like, given how different orientation is going to be this year. And I think that this budget kind of encapsulates that and makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Okay, now we can go on to questions. If anybody has questions on the motion.
Yeah, Councillor Tom speaking. I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I see that you said that the O-Week mobile app license is $50,000. I was just wondering what that money is being used for.
I can quickly touch on it, and I might defer to Hannah for that one. I know they've been looking at like a larger platform beyond just an app itself. So I know if you've seen the past, they've had Socio. I think there's a bit more larger applications and platforms that they're looking into just for more event-based stuff. But Hannah, do you want to touch on that at all?
I'm happy to. That's a great question. Essentially, what that means in terms of platforms that we're looking at is we need more, in a normal O-Week, what we would normally have is an app that has a calendar on it, a schedule of the events that are going on. But what we were able to assess is the fact that in this COVID world, especially with different constituencies such as Huron being fully online, and many of our first year students not coming to campus in the fall, we recognized that there was a need for there to be both strong virtual infrastructure in place to support what is an online O-Week, as well as to supplement what the in-person experience will look like. And so as far as platforms go, we are looking for platforms that can provide strong forms of engagement online with our students that are fully virtual, as well as to augment the in-person experience for our first year students. Yeah, and we're looking at several different platforms as well, because there's varying need in terms of what we need to accommodate a virtual O-Week. So when we say 50,000, that will likely be for 2 different platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Prue. So I was wondering, in the budget outlined, it says that money is being taken out from Med On Site because it's no longer being used, and the money was taken out of the LST retreat, but it doesn't say where it's being reallocated.
So those, when I did those, so the money for those 2 specific lines got taken out of the full budget. So like if you look at the previous budget, it was actually taking a deficit. So now we're surplusing 8,000. It's obviously a board budget's still a forecast. Like at the end of the day, it's all it is going to be a forecast. But it was just to understand that those 2 things were happening. So you'll see it's now a surplus of 8,000, which offset those 2 costs.
Are there any other questions?
Councillor Beltran, if you want to go ahead. Councillor Conchadia said they no longer have a question.
Okay. Yeah, so this is Councilor Beltran. The question that I have, it's going back to the app, just for some clarification. The 50,000 that we're looking at possibly spending on this, on the 2 platforms that were mentioned, is this a licensing fee then that we're paying into, or is this development that we're paying into? What exactly is it for? The main reason why I'm asking is I'm wondering if it's that 50,000 could be better allocated to maybe something like Frost Week if people are coming back in the second term.
Hannah, did you want to jump on this?
Yeah. So I'll start with the Frost Week piece. What I specifically asked the Orientation Advisory to commit to, and what they have committed to, is a scope for the fee. And so when we talk about how we're spending money for this specific O-Week fee, what the Orientation Advisory Committee has committed to is that this fee is going to be spent on a September O-Week. So it would go outside of the scope of the fee to allocate funds towards a Frost Week. And at this point, I think in terms of the unpredictability of what the virus could look like come winter, I would be very hesitant to confirm at this point an allocation of fees towards a Frost Week. As far as the app goes, the reason why a lot of these apps are very expensive, from my understanding, and I'm going to preface this by saying my understanding of technology is, I would say, very baseline. But my understanding is that to hold the number of students that we need on these streaming or social platforms, it costs quite a bit of money to ensure that, for example, the proper security infrastructure is in place online, that the developers of these apps, so we're not having an app developed for us, we're paying platforms, or I think app is misleading. I want to say platforms. We're paying these platforms to host our students and potentially customize experience towards what is a Western virtual O week. And so all of that costs money. And specifically holding the number of students at the quality of streaming and social interaction and everything that we're hoping to do. That is what we are paying for. And of course, I'm summarizing, I think the cost associated with this. But does that provide a better picture of potentially why it costs so much money?
Yeah, it does. I was just concerned that it was being used for development rather than just licensing fees, because 2 months is not enough time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your question. And yeah, it's mostly licensing.
Counselor Chassie?
Hi. So my question is, since a week is going to be moved online, how come we're still planning for costs of, for example, where'd it go? For transportation, like $8,000 in golf carts. Because if we're online and we're not going to be in person, why is the cost that we're planning for? Because I understand, like, during O week, like, you have the carts because you need to get around really quickly. There's people all over the place. But if it's online, what's the purpose of this expense?
I can take that. So just to clarify, OEEC is not going to be fully online for all students. We will have students in residence. In fact, I believe we are at almost our max capacity for a de-densified residence experience, which means that we will have quite a few first-year students on campus. So what we have committed to in terms of an orientation experience from the Orientation Advisory Committee is that although we will have a fully universally accessible orientation week virtually, for the students that are in person, that will only be part of an augmented experience. So there will be in-person events and there will be an in-person experience. Of course, that is all based on the assumption of health and safety, and that by the time we get to September, that we are allowed those numbers in person. But I do just want to clarify that the reason that there is a need for golf carts is because we will be having in-person events.
All right, thank you.
I have no one else on the speakers list.
Okay, perfect. Then we can move on to debate if there's no other questions. Okay, perfect. We can move on to debate then. Are there any points of debate?
Not seeing anyone in the chat.
Okay, then we can move on to, we can call the question on turning point.
Great, the poll is open. All right. Close the polls and the motion passes 97% in favor with 3% abstaining.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next motion then. Councillor Deagle, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of the day, we're all here to help students, and we consistently strive to find the best way possible to do so. So stemming from the experiences of the executive with regard to the student experience and advocacy standing committees, this motion has been created to change the respective committees' terms of reference according to Appendix C. This will allow committee members to engage in more targeted advocacy with parties and stakeholders, both internal and external to our Western community, as well as removing inefficacies and redundancies currently experienced by the Advocacy and Student Experience Standing Committee. This is congruent with this year's restructuring of the USC Executive with regard to the introduction of the Vice President's University Affairs and External Affairs. This motion is calling for a trial experience of the modified terms of reference. These changes will be revisited at next year's November meeting of council. I can defer speaking rights to the current executive members if they have any details that they'd like to add.
Yeah, I'll just quickly touch on, thanks Sebastian, that was awesome. I'll quickly touch on the reasoning. He addressed that it was a previous issue. A lot of the reasoning for this was just based off efficiency for this year and to help workflow for all members and to help make sure that these two committees were supportive of, or would be supported by a specific executive. I think the one big thing me, Megan, and Melissa talked about is the actual process of this. And we wanted to open up the fact that this will be a restructuring and it'll allow counselors to move committees as well. We're going to be, obviously there's a bit more logistics to work out, but I think I wanted to emphasize that with this motion coming forward was that we are allowing counselors to move around and we think it'll just help with efficiency. I think the one big point you'll realize the Student Experience Standing Committee hasn't had more than 2 motions in the last year almost, and it just isn't effective anymore, and we want to have the most support possible. And I'll highlight the fact that a lot of the VPUA's responsibilities will fall under that section of student experience to work alongside Hannah's programming.
All right, thank you. Councillor Kitching, did you want to speak to the motion?
Sure. So as was mentioned, I think this just kind of makes sense that because the Student Experience Standing Committee wasn't getting as many motions, this just more evenly distributes the workload and ensures that kind of all areas of advocacy are getting proper amounts of attention rather than kind of putting too much on one group. And I think it just makes sense to kind of spread the workload around in a more equitable fashion. And I really do like the idea of being able to switch around between committees as well, just because like if you signed up for advocacy committee, for example, because you have an internal advocacy like passion and that moves, it makes sense to be allowed to switch back.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions on the motion?
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Chazzy.
So with counselors being able to move from like their standing committees, does that mean that they get to choose to move entirely to one, or that they can move freely from both? As in, like, would they be, if they're on external advocacy and they want to work on a student experience standing committee internal affair, are they a non-voting member, or would they be able to bounce back and forth?
I can address that quick if Megan, you want to add to. But they won't be able to jump back and forth. We're gonna reopen the portal just to allow students to transition because of the change, but then obviously close off again and allow, because we want to have the specific set voting for the year.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, like we need to see what the numbers are for those who are interested in switching. I mean, like obviously like governance and finance isn't affected, so like they won't be like opening up to switching, but like those students who are interested in internal advocacy, who might like be on the advocacy committee, like those students and like any students and like, or sorry, counselors in those like 2 affected committees, those will be the ones that we're working with to like figure out like placement.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ali, I have a question. So as the vice chair of the Advocacy Standing Committee as it stands currently, I have a question about how are those 2 committees going to interplay with each other? Because I'm sure, as you know, Vic and Mackenzie can attest to, there is, you know, a great deal of partnership between internal and external advocacy. So how do you see those 2 committees interplaying, as well as, since you are offering and extending the opportunity for members of those 2 committees to essentially switch if they so desire, how are you going to ensure that that doesn't impact the work that the government's teams have already started for the year?
Yeah, I can quickly answer that, and then I don't know if Vic or Mac want to address just the difference between the 2. I'll just quickly address the side of the interplay between the 2. Obviously, we understand that it's not a permanent solution, and this is something that we're internal and external advocacy both are very much go hand in hand as well. But we wanted to point of emphasis that a lot of the internal advocacy does fall into part of Hannah's portfolio as well within the programming side. And a lot of the reason for it was to equal that balance load. And we do understand it isn't a permanent solution. That's why it's coming back to November Council as well, and with a bit more of a permanent solution. But we were hoping for the workflow side of things, just to emphasize the fact that we're allowing students to switch those. And a lot of the time, the priorities aren't really set back in May or June. Obviously, you ran on platforms, but now that you understand a bit more emotions coming forward to the student committees, you have the ability to switch within those two. We're hoping it'll allow for a bit more clarity on that. But I'll send to Vic just to address the actual.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think something that's important to consider, even with like the way that the committees are structured right now, is that all the advocacy is housed under one committee, when in reality, that's like not how our advocacy works. Obviously, Mackenzie and I are both advocating to like different bodies on different things, but I guess in the way that the committees are structured right now, Mark kind of touched on it in the sense that it also applies to like Hannah's portfolio as well. I guess one of my goals for this year is like looking at the University Affairs portfolio because it's new and like setting it up for success and making sure that this position is like appropriately situated within the USC. And I think we talked about this a lot, even with the VP External as well, to ensure that the structure of our council and the way that our kind of business flows through council reflects the way that the organization is structured. And so right now that's not really the case because all the advocacy is being streamed through one committee that I'm not even necessarily like a member of. Like I go to the advocacy standing committees because I like feel that I should be there because there's advocacy happening that's related to my portfolio. Whereas if we're able to split it, Hannah and I are able to work to support the students and the counselors who are interested in doing university related advocacy, and then Mackenzie is able to support those doing external advocacy because in reality they're quite different. And I think also like it allows us as executives to like better support you as counselors in your like mission and your platforms, whatever it is that you want to accomplish, where I think when we're all over the place and we're not able to kind of consolidate where that advocacy is happening or where those conversations are happening, it makes it really difficult to support you guys in what you want to do. So I think separating it just better reflects the way that we as executives and as an organization can support you in achieving those advocacy related goals. And Mackenzie and I talk pretty frequently, and that's something that like we like will have to figure out just by nature of them being new positions of like how they'll work together. But that's also something that we can like revisit in November as well.
I have an additional question, if that's all right, Megan. So since, just to clarify, will we need to redo the internal elections for the standing committees, or is it merely like a clerical change of the names and then the members can shift, but the governance team stay the same?
I can address this quickly, Megan, if you want to add. I think the plan was to allow the vice chair and the chairs to stay the same, because obviously you've already been elected, and we don't want to go through the process again of that. And you've been elected for a certain reason. So we're going to leave that the same and just allow more of a clerical situation, allow members to transition to the committees, if that helps answer that one.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Councillor Katadia, I just have a quick question. Mark, I know you already spoke to chairs and vice chairs staying the same. I just wanted to ask if that extended to secretaries as well.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to add secretaries to the question.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? If there's no other questions, we can move on to debate on the motion. Are there any points of debate?
Councillor Ali?
Mm-hmm.
On a very general level, I'm in favor of this motion. I think it is, a good idea to redistribute the workload and ensure that all counselors, obviously everyone here is very passionate and, wants to have things that they can actively work on. I guess my only concern would be in, the execution and making sure that there is, consistency across the board in that transition, just so that there isn't, a period of time where, those standing committees aren't able to be, active and productive. We are at a really critical point. It's the summer. We've already all started kind of getting on a bit of a roll, and I would hate to lose that momentum as we're moving into the school year. So I'm very much in favor of making sure that everyone has, equal, workload and opportunity to, grow and develop in their role as a counselor. But I do have concerns about our ability to do that smoothly enough to not interrupt our legislative calendars and our goals for the upcoming year.
All right, thank you. Are there any other points of debate? Okay, if there's no other points of debate, we can call to question and vote on turning point.
Polls should be open. We're waiting for one more person. There we go. All right, so the polls are closed. The motion passes 82% in favor, 3% opposed, and 15% abstaining.
All right, thank you, Melissa. All right, oops, sorry. Okay, motion 4. Counselor Mahalka, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you. I just think this is a really important motion. I'm actually going to defer my speaking rights to President Bakarani. He has a lot of knowledge on this topic, and I'm just trying to help him out. So, yeah.
Can I go ahead and speak, Megan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Hi, friends. First of all, happy birthday to, I think it's Priyanka. And then in terms of this motion, so last year I had the absolute pleasure of chairing the anti-oppression working group. But the anti-oppression working group wasn't able to complete its research. It was a direct response to what happened in English 2017. And essentially this working group is targeted to survey all the ethnocultural clubs on our campus, as well as all the USC peer programs and mature student associations, to kind of just get a sense of what are the issues that they're facing on campus. And then this working group is going to produce a final report by the end of the fall term to provide the USC executives with a little bit more data-driven and informed perspectives on what our advocacy priorities should be. Again, this was something that we tried to do last year, but unfortunately we had created it too late in the year that a lot of the working group members were running in the USC elections and weren't actually able to complete their responsibilities in time. So I'm just bringing this forward in the summer so that we are given a lot more time to actually do the required research and make sure we give our executives something very, I guess, holistic and informed.
All right, thank you. Councillor Barkhouse, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Megan. I think Councillor Mahalkul and Fakarani covered it, but I'm very much in favor of this motion. I believe it's very important for us as a council to examine the experiences of underrepresented communities on our campus to maintain our high standard of student experience that we've come to know here at Western. I'm very excited for the potential of the work to be done here, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the motion?
Councillor Prue? I have a question. It says in the motion that this working group will be composed of 1 chair and 4 general members. I was just wondering how this is determined and when it will be determined so that the group can get started as soon as possible.
Am I allowed to answer?
Yeah, I'm just going to let
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Fakarani.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So basically, we were imagining that it's going to be composed of 5 USC counselors or presidents. And essentially, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but after debate period, people are able to nominate themselves. And then, so if 5 people nominate themselves, perfect, that's the whole working group. But if over 5 do, we just do a little quick election here. And then the chair can be elected internally once the working group makes a little group chat and gets their ball rolling.
All right. Are there any other questions?
Hi, so this is Jennifer Villanueva speaking. I just have a quick question about, so would anyone be allowed to get involved in this committee, or would it just be people on USC? Just because I feel like there might be a couple more students throughout the community who might also want to get involved in something like this, but who aren't necessarily a part of the USC. So I was just wondering if they'd be able to get involved in one matter or another.
So what I would say to that is yes, absolutely. I know a lot of student leaders who haven't, gone for a USC position are still very knowledgeable on these topics. What I would recommend though is, just because this is a USC working group and we want to make sure that we're democratically representing our constituents, is that the working group be only composed of elected officials. But then you can definitely have resource members on the working group. You can definitely consult with students and so forth. So to answer the question, like, absolutely yes, we can have other people on the working group. I just wouldn't make them permanent members just for the sake of, upholding our principles. No worries.
I can speak to this as well. I sent you a message, Megan. I don't know if you saw it.
I can't see the chat because I'm screen sharing.
Oh, you're screen sharing. Sorry.
Okay.
I can just speak to this a little bit and give it some context as well. Also from the advocacy, for those of you who are on the advocacy standing committee, I know there were a number of working groups that came to the meeting, and I think it started after this one where amendments were made to include a specific number of council members versus students at large. The committee last year, the structure of it included, I forget the numbers, but it was like X number of members of council and X numbers of students at large. And so, like, I can't make that amendment, but I would encourage somebody to make that amendment because I think it's important that we include students at large that are interested and passionate about these issues. And I think what was discussed for the other like standing committee structures, but not for this one, I think it was just the nature of the conversation happened afterwards. But these selections would happen in September in order to advertise these opportunities to, like, the student at large positions to students at large who would run. And so then anybody who's a voting member of council could run for one of the council spots, and anybody who's a student at large or a non-voting member of council could run could be elected by council as a student at large. And so all those positions would be elected by council at the September meeting. So I can't make that amendment, but that was a conversation that was had at the advocacy standing committee. So, like, I would encourage someone to make that amendment, but I can't do that, or you can leave it as is. That's just context.
I just copied and pasted the edits from the next working group. And so if, like, again, I can't move anything. So if anyone can just, like, make that that motion to amend, that would be really helpful.
I can do that. So I make a motion to amend that
The final be it further resolved. Exactly.
Sorry, who was speaking?
Jennifer.
Okay, and can I get a seconder for the amendment?
Councillor Ali.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the amendment? Are there any points of debate on the amendment? And just for the sake of time, does anybody want to abstain from voting on the proposed amendment? Does anybody want to object to the amendment? Just please say your name so I can count. Okay, if there is no objections, then we can proceed with the motion as amended. Sorry, Zamir, where'd you say you put the?
I'll add it to the agenda. He put it in the chat. I'll put it in the agenda so everyone can see it.
Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot your screen sharing.
Screen
That's on
sharing. Oh
me.
yeah. Gotta send Zoom an email. Sorry, continue. Okay, we can continue with the motion as amended. If there's any other points of debate.
Councillor Prue, I have a question. In the other motions that state the amount, like adding students at large to these working groups, they always give a number of the students at large, whereas this amendment does not. Would it be possible for me to amend the motion to include a specific number
This one
of students
does.
at large?
It says 4.
Yeah.
Where does it say 4?
It's like, it's in the chat. It just says, be it further resolved that the working group be composed of 4 counselors and 4 students at large as elected by council. Be it further resolved that 1 chair is internally elected.
All right, thank you.
No worries.
I think Melissa's adding it to the agenda document too, and if anybody wants to find it there as well.
It's in there. Also, just as a sidebar, I just got issued a tornado warning for my area, so if I lose my power, sorry.
Oh my
All right.
God.
Go to the basement. Sorry, shouldn't joke.
My basement is terrifying. I will not be going to my basement.
I got one too, so go London.
Does anybody have any other points of debate? Okay, then we can vote on turning point on the motion. Sorry, and also just for clarity, are we wanting to wait till September then, since the student at large have been added? Okay.
It'll still give it enough time.
Okay.
Just to clarify, we're voting on the motion as amended, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I just
Unfortunately,
didn't see that on the poll.
I can't change it in real time. Once I start the session, I can't change anything. So you are, though, voting on the amendment that's in the agenda document. Just waiting on one more person. There we go. Okay, polls are closed. The motion passes 97% in favor with 3% abstaining.
All right, thank you, Melissa. We can move on to motion 5 then. Councilor Barkhouse, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Megan. So I'll preface this quick with giving credit where it's due. This motion is entirely Councillor Faculties. I'm just moving it on his behalf. But just before I defer to him, I'd like to mention that this is a group that was created last year, but was dissolved at the end of the year before a new environmentalism and sustainability policy was created. However, the group did lots of valuable research, which will be a great place for this new group to start off. The motion is just to get the ball rolling early so we can implement a sustainability policy after consultation and research sooner rather than later. And with that, I'll defer to Councillor Faculties to explain the rest.
Hi friends, I'm back. Yeah, super similar to the last motion, except the only differences are, first I'll provide some context. So basically, last year, the USC repealed its sustainability policy just because it was ineffective, and then it tasked the sustainability working group that was created with coming up with a new policy. Again, similar issues where the members of the working group just didn't have enough time. So I I'm motioning to create a new one, and the new policy should be created no later than the end of the winter term. So it has a little bit more time than the former motion. It's identical in composure, whatever the word is, in terms of like counselors, students at large, and so forth. And the main purpose of this is just to help create a new sustainability policy to guide USC operations. So again, in that sense, it's very internal. It's not about Western policy, but it's about USC policy. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Councillor Mahaka, would you like to speak to the motion?
I echo President Fakarani's thoughts on this. I think it's really, really important. I think sustainability is something that we all can agree that is a very, very important part of the future of this campus. And I think it's important that we get started on it sooner. So yeah, so again, this one, this motion has the 4 counselors and the 4 students at large with an internal chair, hopefully like encompassing all types of students. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions on the motion?
I have a question, Councillor Baldwin.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to quickly, the second be it further resolved one, where it talks about producing a policy by the end of the winter 2021 term. So that would be April of 2021. Is that, am I correct on that one? Okay, so that would be, would it be, I just want to know, would it be after, like, would this policy come up at the AGM, basically? That's the idea right now?
I'll defer to Zamir for that one.
Zamir's frozen.
Oh.
What? Am I glitchy? Hi.
I think you're good now.
Oh my god, no. Yeah, so it says no later than, just so that we give as much time as needed. I just want to make sure this is a really informed policy that we're creating. So ideally, if it's finished earlier, that's totally fine. But if it does need to go to the AGM, that is, I guess, the latest point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, we can go on to debate. Are there any points of debate on the motion?
Hi, I'm Counselor Joe. I think there might be a clerical error in the spelling of counselor with 1 L or 2 L's. I tried Googling it. It seems the USC uses 2 L's for this and the previous motion.
Those are totally clerical, and I can fix those after.
Yeah.
I think so.
Thank you. Are there any other points of debate? Okay, if there's no other points of debate, we can call to question, so please vote on turning point.
Polls are open. Just waiting on one more person. There we go. Okay, polls are closed and the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Okay, on to our 6th motion. Councillor Lee, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes. All right. So tragically, my co-founder is not able to be here with us today, but Councillor Campbell and I have co-founded a working group to look into sexual and gender-based violence on campus, particularly in light of COVID within a specific residence lens. We understand and acknowledge that social distancing measures, as we understand them currently in terms of residents, are going to force students to be within their residences for longer times, and that statistically and historically increases the probability and likelihood of sexual or gender-based violence within those spaces. So we really just want to make sure that, really take a look at the way that the new policy that was passed May 1st, 2020 this year, is how that is interacting with housing policy, as well as housing's ability within the COVID context to provide suitable and sufficient support and resources for survivors. So that's kind of really the scope of our group. We're really fortunate that we already have the group composed. We've already started our research and started building those relationships, which is why in the be it further resolved sections that we don't have anything like specifying makeup in terms of students at large or counselors, because that has very much already been composed. So the motion is really just to officially recognize us as a working group so that we're able to task the executive with SGBV related advocacy work, as well as lend us a little bit more credibility when we are having those higher level meetings and presenting our research. The goal of this group is not to produce policy papers. We don't feel that it is we don't feel it's the best idea, just because we really want to give the current policy, the new passed policy, an entire year to see how it plays out and where are the gaps and the issues in that policy before we propose amendments to it. It's a little bit backwards to propose changes to something that you haven't seen how it actually functions. So our goal really is to produce an extensive research report of our findings, our consultations, and any suggestions that we can come up with to further improve both the residents' experience within a specific SGBV lens. So I am more than happy to field any questions, and it looks like I have one from Councillor Folia, if I'm okay to go ahead and take that.
Just hold on one sec. Did Councillor Campbell's proxy want to share anything on her behalf?
Yeah, we do need a seconder since Councillor Campbell's not here.
I can second it.
Sorry, who?
Councillor Palladino.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to speak to it?
I think I'm on the committee as well. I think I pretty much covered everything, though.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Lee, feel free to go ahead with questions then.
Perfect.
Hi, Councillor Folia, Engineering. So my question is, I would like to know who is currently on the group, how these people were elected or appointed to work on this group, and what the demographic breakdown of the members of the group actually contain right now, whether or not you may have voices or opinions from all demographic areas in order to actually advocate for sexual harassment and any of this gender-based violence on campus. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the question. So to start with how the group kind of is composed and how those members came to be and how the group kind of has comprised itself. So that was just through conversation with other counselors about our interests, as well as suggestions from Melissa about in her meetings with counselors, the initial ones that we did in the summer, talking about, what our areas of interest are and what our goals are for the year. She kind of collected names of individuals who either had run on, issues of SGBV or had spoken about, interests in that area. And then we kind of just we formed our group off of basically interest from those around us. In terms of the demographic breakdown, we were really aware that, you know, some of the largest issues with the SGBV policy and resources as they stand right now is that they are really Eurocentric and they are inaccessible to a lot of student demographics and communities. And that was something that we wanted to be careful we weren't replicating within our own context. So to make sure that, you know, we have as wide an array of students represented as possible, we have all of the HBK presidents on our portfolio, as well as a variety of students from different faculties. Admittedly, the majority of students who are, you know, on this particular committee come from either, you know, the FAM faculties, social science, or the affiliates. But those were the individuals who, you know, expressed interest to us when we were, you know, kind of looking for people to be involved. We kind of capped the capacity where it is currently, which is about 14, I think it's 14 or 15 individuals as it stands right now. I'd have to double check the exact numbers. But it was really important to us that it was large enough in order to, you know, represent a broad enough population of the student community while also being small enough to be effective. You know, like the old adage, you know, like too many cooks in the kitchen. We just, you know, wanted to make sure that we were as efficient and effective as possible. Does that answer your question at all? Or is there anything I can further clarify?
Yeah, that's okay. I guess just more on like last question about the demographics. I'm just wondering, like, the breakdown of maybe male to females on the group, just because sexual and gender-based violence happens to both parties.
Yep, so that is something that, you know, we were conscientious of when we created the group, and we do have a number of male identifying students on our group. I think it's also important, you know, that we don't adhere to a binary in terms of understanding how sexual assault impacts various individuals. And so, you know, obviously while we were conscientious and you know, really wanting to make sure that we have male representation on our group, we weren't specifically seeking individuals to fill quotas. You know, we want to make sure that we're not being performative or tokenistic in who we have on our group. So it was really based on, you know, interest and experience rather than identities. But we are very aware that this is an intersectional issue and something that, you know, those are questions that we are going to have to continue to answer throughout the year of are we being representative enough? Are we being diverse enough? Are we intersectional enough? And, you know, those are questions that, you know, we attempted to answer to the best that we could in the creation of this group, and are questions that we will be continuing to answer throughout the tenure of this year.
Councillor Prue.
Councillor Prue, music. I was just wondering, you mentioned that the group was formed based out of interest, so that some areas were more represented than others. And I was just curious how the group is going to make sure that there was no bias done in their research by the representation.
Can you define what bias would look like in this context?
For example, when doing research, people tend to look more to groups that they are a part of, rather than looking at such a wide range. So it's totally fair that the group has been created based on people who are interested in working in this group, but I was just wondering how the group was going to make sure that they are not biased in their research.
Okay, great question. So I think that, you know, it is really important to acknowledge that we do have a very diverse group as it stands right now, in terms of background, identity, faculty, interest, experience, all of those deals. You know, it is a very multifaceted group in who we have available. And we have taken steps to ensure that, you know, we are as representative as possible. Currently, Obviously, nothing is perfect, and there's obviously room and areas for us to grow and re-examine. How are we conducting our research, and what are the potential gaps that might come up in light of the way that we're conducting our research. But those are questions that we're very much aware of, and we've been really following kind of the steps that we learned about research and constituent engagement through our training provided by Melissa and Megan. So it is very grounded in terms of the way that we are approaching this. It is grounded in, theory and practice of how we are approaching these conversations. Obviously, like I said, a couple questions ago, these are things that will be ever evolving in our group. They are something that, over time we will refine and hone the way that we're, approaching these, and, even, accepting more members or, that kind of deal. But as it stands right now, we're really just looking to continue the research that we've already started, continue those relationships that we've formed, and be able to, task the executive with, advocacy that, becomes apparent to us as we move through this
work. Councillor Villeneuve.
Okay, so I was just wondering if this committee is just centered around sexual violence as well as gender violence within the residents, or if it's within the faculties as well, just because I'm specifically in engineering and I know that there's not a lot of women in engineering. So I was just curious if this is going to be just based in residents, or if it's going to be advocating for gender violence and sexual violence within the faculties or anything like that as well.
Perfect, thank you. So to clarify the scope of this, sexual and gender-based violence is a very large topic to take on as a whole. We are specifically looking at sexual and gender-based violence within a housing lens for this year. Obviously, if our research or our consultations, bring up topics in other areas, of course we're willing to hear that. The goal really for this year, or this iteration of the working group, is to get as good an understanding as to how sexual and gender-based violence policy and procedure function on campus in our residences. The scope of the group could definitely be expanded in future years to look at, the prevalence as well as the response to sexual and gender-based violence in particular faculties. But we really wanted to bring our scope into more of a residence lens because of the impact of COVID and the impact of social distancing on, time spent in residence. And really seeing how the new policy that was passed May 1st interacts with the new housing realities that we're navigating this year. Does that answer your question at all, or is there anything else I can clarify?
No, that answers the question. And this is just generally on personal interest. Is there any engineering students on this council currently?
I would have to double check the exact list, but as I understand it, not currently.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that.
No worries.
I don't see any other questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions then? Okay, if there's no other questions, we can move on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Chazzy?
Yeah, just last minute, Councillor Chazzy here on Councillor. Would there be the possibility to open this up to students? Because I understand that the group was made out of interest and talking to people, which is great. But would there be the possibility to actually advertise it so other students get the chance? Because, for example, I didn't know that this was going to happen until the agenda setting council meeting. Right, so I didn't have knowledge that this group was being created, and I completely support it, and I want this to go through. Don't get me wrong. But would there be the possibility to open this up to students who this opportunity was unknown to?
That is definitely something that we could take a look at. You know, I don't want to speak out of turn until I've had a chance to, speak with my co-founder and the co-chair of the committee. You know, the reason why it wasn't, published, or made public was not that, it was meant to be, be kept quiet, or that, we were particular about who we wanted on the committee. It was more just about efficiency's sake of, that we had a group of really interested student leaders who were qualified and experienced in this area, and we really wanted to just get going on our research. There's obviously, like I've said before, there's room for amendments in terms of who is on the council and all that stuff. Really, the point of having the motion presented today is to legitimize, the working group as it stands now, so that we can more credibly continue our research. It's not, in no way is this motion as it stands saying that this group has to stay exactly as it is right now, and that there won't be any evolution of who is involved. It's just just to kind of bring the scope of the motion back into what it is. It's really just to be able to empower us and enable us to bring our research and bring this work onto a little bit more of a higher level. And then, if there are obviously individuals who are interested, those are questions that we can address and we can negotiate as we move forward. But I think it is really important to kind of bring the motion back down to what it is, which is to make sure that, this group is able to, the iteration of the group as it stands right now, and that may very well may change, is to advocate and continue our research on a more legitimate level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, then we can move on to debate. Are there any points of debate?
Councillor Folia.
Hi, Councillor Folia, Engineering. I would like to speak against this motion. I think that it has great value as a working group and done correctly. However, I believe that there is too much bias as it stands currently. It seems that there are maybe 14 members of council who are currently sitting on this committee, and so they probably benefit from having this approved and accepted by having more influence than on the USC Council. I do not believe that these people were elected by anyone or have been elected over others on council. I believe it was just people who heard about it and decided that they wanted to do it at the time. And as we heard in the question period, other people have not or did not hear about it, and so did not put their name forward to be on the committee. So just to wrap it up, speaking against this, I believe that anyone who is on the committee currently should abstain from voting because you do have conflict of interest. So yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Chazzy.
Councillor Chazzy, I'd like to speak in favor of this motion. I think the intent behind it is very strong and what can be applied is great. While the committee was maybe established in a bit of a closed way, each of the content of the committee does and has shown commitment to this topic through their elections and clearly through council. So again, speaking in favor, I think this motion is great, and what can establish this upcoming year, especially with COVID and residents, is really important to council. Thank you.
Councillor Prue.
Councillor Peru Music. I am speaking for the motion. However, I would like to propose an amendment to the motion. I would like to propose an amendment that the working group have an addition of 4 students at large that are from relevant stakeholders on campus to ensure that there is a wider representation and just that there are students involved that wish to be involved, and that these groups have been contacted. So for example, I believe in one of the other motions, it gives an example of stakeholders. I think it was the previous motion. So there could be representatives from Pride Western, for example, or that there has to be 4 stakeholders on campus that would be elected then in September.
So I'm just trying to draft some wording for this amendment on the agenda. So to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, you're suggesting that we maybe say, be it further resolved that this working group add 4 student at large positions. Is that fair?
Yes.
Sorry, Melissa, do you need a minute or are you good?
Amber, if you can just check on the agenda, it's down at the bottom, like where the motion is, motion 6. Just make sure that my wording is accurate, and then as long as it's good with Amber, I'm good. Or sorry, Councillor Prue.
Were you able to find it, Councillor Prue?
Sorry, I had the agenda open on a separate document, so I'm just taking a look right now. Yes, this looks great. Thank you.
Can I get a seconder for the amendment?
I can second it. Councillor Chazzy.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the amendment? Any points of debate on the amendment?
Councillor Villeneuve, is your point of debate on the amendment or on the main motion?
I'm not sure if it's on either. It's just also a suggestion potentially to add to the amendment potentially. I was wondering if potentially resident softs could be involved within this committee potentially, because they're always going to be living within the residence and they would have a bigger impact and potentially be able to communicate one-on-one with the students, and might be an easier way to bridge the communication gap, so that this committee would be able to get or relay more information effectively. That's just an idea. It doesn't have to be taken, but.
Megan, may I quickly speak to that actually?
Sorry, just one sec, Councillor Ali. Students at large could include anybody, I believe. Melissa?
Yeah, students at large could be anyone. So for those of you who have not been on council before, the way the student at large elections work, we would post through the USC website, social media, that kind of thing, advertising these positions. Students would then come to our next council meeting and speak to their candidacy. So you could elect, you could consider as part of your decision when you're electing people that you want to make sure that softs are included, or you could weight that experience more heavily in your deliberations. But yeah, students at large would be anyone who is not a counselor. So that is the key distinction. We create typically student at large positions so that not people who aren't currently counselors have an opportunity to participate.
All right, thank you. Sorry, we were on questions for the amendment.
I think we had just moved on to debate on the amendment.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Any
debate on the proposed amendment? Okay, if there's no debate, would anybody like to abstain from voting on the proposed amendment? Please just say your name. Okay, are there any objections to passing the amendment? Okay, if there is no objection, then we will proceed with the motion as amended, and we can resume debate on the motion as amended.
Right, so I don't know if anybody has changed their minds, but I did have Councillor Palladino next up for speaking to the motion.
Thank you. I am in favor of this. I am on the committee, so I am a little biased, but I also just wanted to clarify. Councillor Ali and Councillor Campbell like spearheaded this, and those of us who were all interested want to be on it too as well. And also, if you spoke to Melissa and I guess the private discussions that she had with us about our goals, if you had said that this was something that you were interested in advocating for, then she would put you into contact with those of us who expressed interest. So that's how we came into contact with other people who were interested in the committee and wanted to be on the committee. Also, we were just going to be like a working group to help with all this, to advocate for this. The reason why we wanted to pass this is because when we talked to the exec about it, it was more like we would be taken more seriously about this serious matter and just have more credibility as well. So even if this doesn't pass, I'm fairly certain that we will still continue to be a working group and advocate as well. So to us, it matters for this to be passed because we want to be taken seriously, we want credibility, and we want to be able to like have more like advocacy and things like that. But even if this doesn't pass, I just want to say like we're still very passionate and interested in advocating for this. So we will still continue to be like an unofficial working group.
Okay, are there any other points of debate?
I had Councillor Petch up next.
Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to echo what was just said. This group was not made up to actually originally bring forward this motion. It was kind of an unofficial working group of people who were discussing wanting to look into this further and put a policy regarding this forward. It was by the recommendation of Mr. Reeser and Ms. Brusso to put this forward as an official working group to add more validity behind it. So what was just said that it will probably continue, and it was just going to be an unofficial several counselors working together on something before this came forward.
Megan, Councillor Folia has indicated that they would like to bring forward a motion at this point. I don't know how you want to address that.
Sorry, a motion for what?
Councillor Folia, do you want to explain?
Yeah, sure, I can explain. So my motion would be to postpone the vote for this motion until potentially the next meeting. And the reasoning behind this is, as stated behind the members who are on this committee, the reason for bringing forward this motion is to basically improve their reach and make sure that they are taken more seriously. I think that in order to be taken very seriously, that this kind of working group, similar to our last two working groups, should have people that are basically approved by council and not just self-appointed into the working group. And so it seems like there are lots of people on council who didn't hear about this beforehand, so they might not be on the working group and they may want to be on the working group. So the reason for pushing the timeline back to a later meeting would allow anyone who had not heard about this working group to be able to put their name forward to actually join the working group.
Sorry, I'm just trying to think about the best way to do this.
So if I can, Megan, I think I've got a couple of suggestions for how you could do that. And for you as well, Councillor Folia, let me know what you think. It could be a motion to send it back to committee, or it could be a motion, or it could be an amendment to change. So similar to the other motions, we could amend the be it resolved, or actually even the, yeah, no, it would probably need to be the be it resolved clause to, if you had a sense of how, like, or if we as part of the discussion of the amendment came to a sense of how many people or how many spots on the you would want to see on the working group. Because we've already added the amendment for the students at large, we'd have to do that election in September at the same time as all the others. So if you were to amend it to include a specific number of counselors to be elected, we could do all of that at once. Does that make sense?
Okay, then can we amend it to say, can we amend the section where it says X amount of members of council to say elected members of council?
So, sorry, I'm just looking at. So if you look at the agenda for me, just make sure that I'm accurately representing what you're, oh, whoops, I'm in the wrong spot. Be it resolved that this word composed of however many, so you'll need to figure out that one. And this would be an amendment.
Thank you.
All right, can I get a seconder for the amendment?
I can second it, Councillor Mendes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the amendment?
Councillor Ali, so in your ideal world, is it that the co-chairs as well are being re-elected? I would like to just, re-echo what everyone, what a couple other, councillors have said, where this is independent, where this originated independently of, the USC. So I don't believe that it would be fair to remove all of the individuals who have, started meaningful research and consultations. I would suggest, and I guess my question for you is that, is it merely just an addition of members who are interested to this group rather than an entire restructuring of individuals who have already put in time and effort to create this group?
I don't believe we set a number on the amount of councillors. I would just like to see them be actually elected by the fellow councillors if they're doing work on behalf of the USC.
Just to clarify, that was the intent of this motion, was that the group be approved to do the work for the USC as recommended by President Reeser and VP Barroso.
Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions on the amendment?
Yes, I had a question.
Okay, go
President Petch. Is the goal of this amendment to have only the elected people as voting members, so the 4 student at-larges and the 4 counselors and everybody else who's currently on the working group to not have voting rights?
I don't know. That would probably be up to the chair of the working group. I'm not sure.
I had another question.
Yeah.
How would the chair of the working group be chosen if it's the 4 student at-larges and the 4 counselors being elected? So obviously it would only be the 8 voting members.
Oh,
oh yeah, go ahead.
So the way that I understood that it works was that when 4 people are elected, there's a 5th person who's also elected who then becomes the chair, who does not get voting rights, and unless they have to make a distinction. But what I thought Councillor Folia was trying to say was that every member that currently sits on this group would then just run for the election, because there's no set limited number of students that outlined in the amendment.
Yes, exactly.
I think if you are electing someone, like, you have to elect them all, you know what I mean? Like, it kind of puts you in an awkward position if you only, like, elect like half of the group and then the rest would just like join on. You know what I mean? So if the amendment passes, I think what they just said makes sense.
As I see it right now, this will allow any counselor who would like to be on the working group who is not currently on the working group to have that opportunity as well. If you would like to set a limit on the number of counselors who would have then voting positions, then they would have to actually run for the position. But seeing as it is a working group, unless the chair of the working group decides to limit the total amount of people on the working group, then that would not limit how many counselors could like then work towards these goals.
For some added context, chairs are usually elected from within the working group, so they're not necessarily elected separately as a chair. So if in the earlier examples we said one chair and 4 students or 4 counselors, we would elect 5 people, and from those 5 people, they would amongst themselves choose a chair for the working group.
Megan, may I make a suggestion? I feel like there's been some miscommunication about kind of the intent of this motion, as well as the very administrative aspects of this amendment. May I make the suggestion that we keep it that we essentially amend the amendment to say that and that we open up the group to interested parties rather than completely starting from scratch, in order to preserve the efficiency as well as respect the time and effort that's been put in by the students already involved.
Can I get a seconder for the proposed change?
Counselor Katadia, I'll second that.
Okay. And just keep an eye on the doc so we can help Melissa get the wording down here.
Okay, yeah, 1 second.
So what you're proposing, sorry, just so I'm clear, you're proposing an amendment to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, that would, instead of that, the working group be composed of counselors elected by council, which is, sorry, that's redundant on my part, that it would be it resolved that the composition of the working group will be opened to all interested counselors, interested parties.
I would say interested parties, yeah.
To be elected by council, which I think, and the only reason I'm including the elected by council is I'm trying to preserve the spirit of Councillor Folia's original amendment, which was that basically the opportunity to be part of the working group, but also to have that working group confirmed by council.
Right. So just to clarify, my amendment at the core is that we retain the individuals that are currently on the group, and that we elect an additional up to 4 counselors and 4 students at large. Does that make sense?
Okay, hold on. Let me think about how to structure that. So then that's not opened up to all interested parties. That is
open to 4 elected counselors and 4 elected students at large.
In addition to the individuals who are already involved.
Eva, how many students are currently involved?
Let me do a count for you.
Thank you. I'm just thinking if you tack on 4 to whatever number that is, this motion could be basically summed up by saying like 14 counselors.
So we're sitting at 12, actually, just for clarification.
Yeah, so if you just want to change it to maybe 16.
Okay, but we're not electing the original 12. We're making the space for 4 additional elected spaces.
have a look at that version of the amendment and let me know what you think.
One moment, please.
Looks great. And I guess if we change that, we can remove the previous amendment.
Yeah, if this one passes, then it'll just replace that. Eva, is the wording correct?
I was struggling to find it, but we are.
Yeah, you gotta scroll down.
rolling in. We're rolling into town. Okay, up. The composition. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Are there any questions on the proposed amendment to the amendment? Any points of debate?
Megan.
Yeah.
Can I just motion to suspend the rules for a moment? I think we just want to like formulate this all together. I think that might help to make it like more coherent, more coherent, and like so everyone's on the same page before we kind of go through with it. Just because I think there's a lot of layers going on. So I'd like to motion to suspend the rules.
Okay.
And if we want to handle the amendment first, we can do that. Then we can, because I know it's getting pretty layered.
Sure.
So.
What are you looking to do?
We're just wanting to kind of hold for a second in order for us to like maybe speak together just more flowingly in order to actually like figure out what everyone's wanting. Because I think there's kind of like, it feels like there's several different kind of camps on this. So I think if we can just speak to it to kind of piece it all together, I was hoping that would help create like a motion that we're all happy with and understand, and then kind of motion it forward, just given the amendments are kind of stacking up.
Okay, does anybody have any, well, we're in debate now, so does anybody have any issues that you want to discuss now? Like,
I think, Megan, what he's asking for is it's just like the equivalent of like if we were in person, we would take a recess and like a group would kind of like huddle to figure out like what the wording would be like. So if we could just like pause on like the Robert's rules to be able to just like discuss what the wording of it will look like, and then we can go back into like a council mode, but just so that we can talk a bit more freely about like what like people want the amendment to say, because we can't like break off in a group because we're on Zoom, obviously.
okay, yeah, that sounds good. Does anybody have any objections to, or do we want to just recess for a couple minutes then and talk during the recess just so it's less voting? Because I can just motion to recess then, and we can just, those who are interested in the conversation can participate. Does that work, Matt?
Yep.
Okay, so we can all motion to recess for 2 minutes, and then if there's no objection to that, those who are interested can just check in and make sure that everybody's happy with it. So we'll start that now and come back at 8 after.
And this way, if you need to like grab food or go to the bathroom or anything, do
Yeah.
that too.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt. Melissa, we wanted to go through overwording, right, of this motion because it's getting pretty layered. Or did you want to throw us into a group chat, or do you want to like just do this right here?
I think it needs to happen actually in the main group, because I can't record the group chat or the breakout rooms. I can only record the main group. And I think for council transparency, the discussion should happen where everyone can access it.
For sure. Okay.
So I don't know, Brandon or Councillor Foley and Councillor Ellie, I will eventually get used to using your last names all the time. I'm specifically just want to make sure that you are both happy with it, and that it is achieving kind of what you're both looking for, because I felt like there was a couple moments where you were talking past each other and having different conversations. So I just want to
To clarify what my ideal outcome from this amendment is that the 12 members, including the 2 co-chairs, remain within the working group, and that we open up the working group with additional 4 elected spaces.
Yeah, so I agree with you that the 12 members who have put in work and have been doing a good job should remain and stay. I just want to make sure that everyone on council who wishes to join this group have the opportunity to, as well as the people on the working group be kind of approved by council, similar to how they would be approved for any other working group.
So I think my question here, just to maybe fill the gap in, so Eva, looks like you sound like you want to keep obviously the original group, and then Brandon, you want to have them approved by council. So are we looking to, because like the motion, the way the motion's written right now, like the amendments as well, is it allows the same group to stay, but without, like, it goes through the same approval, but we don't have a list of the approval and council can't vote on it. But that's where it sounded Brandon was going, but then Eva, it sounds like you want them to stay as it is without the voting of council. That's where I'm reading the motions, and that's where I think the confusion is.
Yeah, to clarify my position, the 4 additional members would be elected by council, and the 12 individuals who are already making up the group would remain as is, including the 2 co-chairs.
So should the language then read something about like we ratify those 12 original and then elect the 4 additional?
Sure.
That makes
I just want to clarify too that that's 4 additional council members, excluding the 4 students at large that were already added to the motion.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Yes.
Do we want to then make it that 4 students in general, like both students at large and counselors, are able to join, or Councillor Folia, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that amendment was brought forward by councillors Prue and Chazzy, and I believe that having 4 at-large students would be beneficial to this as well. So I think that should remain separate.
Okay.
I would only say, would this then bring the total to 22 people on this working group? So I understand that what was also mentioned is that it wants to kind of stay consolidated to maintain on task. So could it potentially be introduced to council members and to student at large? So at least we have representation from our, more representation from our council, but also open it up to outside students as well.
So what I thought was happening, like personally, when Brendan brought this up, was that they were gonna do, like, it was just a ratification, like we were ratifying these 12 members the way that we ratified, like in our faculty councils, we ratify everyone in after they've been hired. So I thought that was the same process that was happening here. It was like a ratification plus the addition of voted in members from student at large, putting us at 16.
Councilor Mendez, I think Councilor Folio wanted to create spots for additional council members to join.
So my intention is just that if a councillor wanted to be a part of this and did not have the opportunity to be a part of this, that they should be able to have that opportunity. And I just don't see it to be fair that people would have been appointed over elected if there is other councillors who do want to be a part of this as well.
Okay, so just to clarify where you stand, Brandon, are you okay with the motion that we ratify the original 12 members as well as create the, I guess it would be the 8 additional spots, 4 for elected councillors, 4 for students, 4 for 4 student at large, also elected by council?
Yes, and if you would like to as well, you could change the wording to be up to 4 additional counselors, if that would help as well. I know it seems that you don't want this group to grow too big, but I do believe that like if additional students do want to be added, they should have the opportunity.
Okay, so Megan, to clarify, if I'm understanding Councillor Folia correctly, we are on the same page about the amendment that Melissa made, which is the composition of the working group will include those already working on the group with up to 4 additional counselors and up to 4 students at large as elected by council.
So we already approved the 4 students at large amendment, but yeah, I think everybody's on the same page now. Yeah. It's in the document there, the agenda document. Melissa has the updated changes there, which Councillor Ali just read. So if we're on the same page, I think we should return or recess went a bit long. So I think we should get back to it and then proceed to, yeah, sorry.
Can I ask a quick question? Do we want to put a cap? So there's 20 people now. Do we want to put a cap on it? Like, this is bigger than a committee would be, if I'm just being blunt about this. So be very conscientious. Like, I don't know if it makes more sense just to have, I know I obviously want the original committee composition. I'm wondering if it makes sense to have them run for positions. And I don't want to obviously debunk what you've already done, but I just don't think 20 people will have an effective group for the year. And I want to make sure you guys are the most effective as possible.
Sorry, Vice President, Governance and Finance, St. Pierre. Wow, that's a mouthful.
It's a lot.
Sorry, so can you just repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just scared if we go, if like the group becomes like it's a 20-person group now. If you move forward with this motion, so how effective is the group going to be when you have 20 people sitting on it, which is greater than a committee would be? Is there maybe a preference to have those student at larges come in as reference members, or do you want them as full-time sitting members? Like, I think we just gotta be conscientious that like if you're having 20 people come to a meeting every time, it's not gonna be very effective.
I guess we could say that I guess we would have to make an amendment to the student at large amendment and say that students at large sit as resource members, and then the original 12 plus up to 4 additional counselors as elected by council would make up the group. The voting component of that standing committee, and then 4 student at large would act as resource members. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, I don't want you guys to get too in over if you have 20 people voting on a motion,
right?
You're going to be looking at, you have to have at least 10 people that are voting in favor, and like it just becomes a process. If you're not even motions per se, because working groups don't have as much as motioning, but just the fact that if you have 20 people doing research, how is it effective? So that's where and I agree with the resource member. It makes total sense. If you want to do that, move forward with that. Yeah.
Does somebody want to make an amendment then?
I will propose that amendment.
Okay.
So
wait though. I think we need to deal with the amendments that we already have going before.
Yeah, that's true. We should finish that quickly. Okay, sorry, is there any points of debate on the amendment to the amendment that Councillor Ali and Katadia moved and seconded? It's the last one up there, and then we can deal with this other amendment afterwards. Okay, if there's no debate, then we can call the question. Would anybody like to abstain from voting on the amendment? Okay, would anybody like to object to passing the amendment? Okay, so the amendment to the amendment is approved. And we can go back to debate on the motion as amended.
So this is where you could propose that amendment.
So I'll propose an amendment to the amendment that stated the working group include 4 students at large to be elected by council, and I would like to amend that to say that the 4 students at large will be elected by council to the working group, but will sit on the working group as resource members.
All right, and sorry, can I get a seconder for that? The proposed amendment to the amendment? All right.
Counselor Katadia, I can second that.
Okay, Councillor Katadia, thank you. Are there any questions about this change? Any points of debate on the change? All right, then we can call to question on the amendment to the amendment. Would anybody like to abstain from voting? All right. Would anybody like to object to making this change? Okay, then we can proceed with the motion as amended. Are there any points of debate on the motion?
We've had a request in the chat for a list of the current members of the group. I think there's some just interest in seeing what the membership looks like right now.
Is that something that I'm able to provide afterwards, or is that a list that is needed currently?
Councillor Feldman and Mastronardi, that is up to the two of you. You've both made the request.
I think it's definitely something that can be provided later, but my general line of thought was just that basically if they're acting, you know, on behalf of council with our blessing, we should at least know who's involved.
Okay, yeah, sure, for sure. Is it all right? Would you like me to type that out now, like the specific counselors who are involved, or is that, like you said, something that we can provide late after?
We can do it later. Just in general, I thought it's best to just if council knows.
Okay.
Even later is okay.
Sure.
Maybe you could post it in the Facebook group chat when you get a chance, Eva, Councillor Lee.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Not now, but in the future. Okay, so we were on debate on this motion. Are there any further points of debate on this motion? Okay, if there's no other points of debate, then we can call to question. You can vote on turning point. It won't show the changes that we have on the agenda, but those changes have been approved, so.
If you look at the agenda, I've tried to make it really clear about what we took out and what we added instead. So take a look at that before you vote to make sure you're really clear on what you're agreeing to.
Yes.
And I will open polling. Maybe. Come on.
Melissa, it's not coming up on my turning point. Is that a me problem?
No, that's a me problem. My computer's frozen.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Should go now, hopefully. Still waiting on 3 more people. We have 34 people logged in and only 31 votes cast. So can you just all double check that you voted? Megan, we seem to have stalled out at 31 votes. I don't know if you want to give it another minute or if you want me to close the polls.
We'll maybe just close it. We've got a bit of time. Should be okay.
Okay. Oh, there's 32. Hold on.
Oh. I spoke too soon.
Okay, I'm gonna close them in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The polls are closed. And the motion passes 81% in favor, 9% opposed, and 9% abstaining.
All right, thank you. Oops. Okay, we will move on to motion 7. All right, Councillor Zhu, would you like to speak to the motion? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Right, thank you. Hi, everyone. This motion focuses on student affordability during COVID-19. So the basic premise is the fact that COVID-19 will have a negative financial impact on many students, and tuition is unlikely to change. So given those facts, we wanted to focus on making sure that the USC executive could be tasked with the job of advocating for increased education affordability, both in asking the federal and provincial governments to provide universities with subsidies to decrease tuition, and then also calling on Western University to increase the amount of available scholarships and expand bursary eligibility for next year as appropriate. Finally, also to make sure that financial impacts past 2020 and 2021 were addressed. VP Barroso recommended that we include a section that strikes together a working group in order to make sure that students' concerns about affordability are addressed moving forward. So this would create a new working group, and it would allow, it would basically allow for the actions that we take this year to have impact moving forward as well.
Thank you. Councillor Beltran, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I think the only thing I really wanted to add here is just that we really want to make sure that we're expanding who is eligible, because there's a lot of bursaries out there and a lot of scholarships that a lot of students just don't have access to. And that's going to be particularly important here. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking like international students, mature students just are normally excluded.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the motion? Okay, if there's no questions, we can move on to debate. Are there any points of debate? Okay, if there's no debate, then we can call the question. Please vote on turning point.
Polls are open. Waiting for 2 more people. Waiting for 1 more person. Megan, we're still waiting on 1. Do you want me to leave it open for another minute or?
No, I think we're okay. We can close it.
So closing the polls, and the motion passes 97% in favor with 3% abstention.
All right, thank you. Okay, our next section here, motion 8. President Reeser, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'd love to. So just for everyone's just information and reference, it's a bit more of like just a technical motion in terms of with the agenda committee. Mackenzie Metcalf, our VPEA, she already presented this to our advocacy standing committee prior to her putting her name forward to various exterior student union gatherings. So in particular, UCREW and USA. So basically what we needed to do, given there's approval from the Advocacy Standing Committee, we needed to get it properly approved by Summer Council. So that is why it's coming here. So I just wanted to make that clear. And obviously, if there's any questions about the roles, and might I add, she was successful in becoming the VP Finance for USA, as well as the chair for UCREW. So an incredible job by her. But yeah, if there's any question on that, obviously I will let her speak to that, but just in terms of the motion, that is the nature of it. And just to get it approved by our general counsel.
All right, thank you. Can I get a seconder?
I can second.
Sorry, who said that?
Council Baldwin.
All right, thank you. Do you want to speak to the motion?
Not really, just that, like I said, it went through Advocacy Standing Committee already, and then Agenda and Operations Standing Committee, we approved it, and pretty simple, pretty cut and dry.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? All right, any points of debate? Okay, if there's no points of debate, then we can call the question. Please vote on turning point.
Those should be open. Got 33 of 34 votes in. So we just need one more person. Megan, do you want me to close the poll?
Yeah, I think we've had plenty of time.
All right, the motion passes 97% in favor with 3% abstaining.
All right, thank you. Okay, now on to our for information section. Next up is our executive reports. And I'll get those up for you guys.
That's the last of our turning point stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and you can all leave your apps if you need to.
All right. First up, Mr. President.
Hi there. Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, and I just saw the slide did a little bit of a mirror thing, but so bear with that. But yeah, so basically, I guess to start off, although this is kind of a different, I feel like we've said this many times, very different scenario than summer council has usually been. It's really exciting to start off our kind of full tilt year and get into some really amazing motions already. And I did want to just start off by commending the early action already taken and getting up working groups and getting things going. It's been great to see, and also just commending everyone on people have been so active, and it's been so amazing to see even just through the summer. And to that point, I just want to make the like, as we're all on the same page, obviously the unprecedented times, as I'm sure we said hundreds of times, but it is nonetheless very true. And as I said, I want to commend the fact that even in these crazy times, you guys have been just putting in so much work, and it's been so impressive to see. But nonetheless, it has been difficult, and I like to be completely honest with everyone. Obviously, we're in the same boat where there's been some challenges, as I'm sure you've all faced, in terms of representing your faculty councils or your affiliate councils or wherever you may be coming from. But nonetheless, I really do feel like we're all in this together. I think we all have the same intent of just being there to look out for students and really push for some change there. But and kind of in summary on that point, I just want to make it very clear to everyone that the USC executive is here, and we're more than happy. As I guess, given the Zoom, we would say my door is always open, but I guess right now it's my inbox. But for all 6 of us involved, we are welcome anyone to voice any concerns or questions or anything. We're more than happy to help. So I just kind of wanted to start off with that point, just to say that obviously the unprecedented times need to be acknowledged, but you guys have been so incredible. So, and then on kind of a housekeeping, just in terms of executive reports, I wanted to start on before I kind of dive into mine. This obviously may be repetition for returning counselors or people who've seen this before, but basically how it's going to go is that our intent is that we're not going to go through every single point in excruciating detail. We're going to highlight kind of the main things that we want to flag, given we were able to send them out beforehand a few days prior. So obviously if there's anything in particular that you would like us to highlight or you want a little bit more focus on, by all means, please ask us the questions there. But we were wanting to at least just give kind of a little bit of an overview of the ones that we really wanted to highlight in particular. So that's why if we're glazing over some of the bullet points that are there, we're not trying to obviously skip it or hide it. It's purely just for efficiency of time, because I know we're already about 2.5 hours deep, so we are cognizant of obviously of your Sundays. So I just want to make that very clear in terms of for people new to the executive report kind of structure. So I guess then to actually get into mine. So for mine, I do want to focus. Yeah, I just saw Zamir with the produce bags. It is a great tip, and I just found and then some by the Arkells like 2 days ago from Cam. So that's been a big find. So definitely check out that song. But yeah, so then in terms of actually getting into to the body of this update, I wanted to start off with the first point, so addressing anti-Black racism. I'll do this one I'm going to put a little bit more emphasis on and go through that brief that we've created, as I feel it's obviously extremely important for council to understand where we've been putting our efforts, but then also where we're heading. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk through that. It does refer to numerous people on our team, so it is kind of reflective of many efforts from our team, not just me. I want to make that very clear. And then after that, we'll pause for questions. So I'm going to put a particular emphasis there, and then I'll finish the rest of the report once we are through there. So I just want to make that clear where I'm heading. So then, yes, then I guess we will go into that. If everyone wants to pull that up to follow along, or I can just speak, totally your decision there. But so basically, in the way that we went about this, obviously, it was the day before like our official start on June 1st. We were able to put out our statement, and I did want to commend in that statement writing as well as all of the efforts that I'm about to outline. We had incredible consultation and support from our ESS coordinator, Matthew Dawkins, who I believe is actually on the call right now, which is amazing. And then Shadia Adekunte, who is our peer programs AVP, as well as we were able to work closely with the BSA, particularly their president, Angie. So I just kind of wanted to give credit where they've been incredible in us trying to form our responses. So yeah, so I guess I'll go through these points, just kind of acknowledging each one. And then if anyone obviously wants me to slow down or focus on any of them, definitely let me know. And yeah, thanks Cam for sharing the link there. So I will go through. So basically the first one, addressing anti-Black racism in the orientation program. This is one that is in particular kind of focus and interest with our VP SSP, Hannah, who's already been doing incredible work, as well as passing a motion in advisory council. So that was an incredible step. Obviously work to be done as we're always continuing to improve, but that was kind of one of the particular focuses. And a lot of these responses were in connection with the call for action from the BSA statement that was put out on numerous social media channels. So just wanted to kind of reference where we were building some of this off of as well. And then also from the OC Internal and Policy Review, that will be spearheaded by our VPGF, Mark St. Pierre, as well as some of our internal staff, like our head of people and development. So that's when we're going to look kind of internally of how we can work better, even in like our hiring policies and practices. So that's one area there. Then from the external side, so as you can probably find out, there's quite easy connections to numerous of our vice presidents. So this is something that Mackenzie's working quite closely with USA on, and it's something that USA has been already underway. So they're definitely working hard in that area. Within community support, this is one that we're excited about to partner with our BSA and our other ethnocultural clubs. to provide our community supports for our Black students on our campus and in our community. The fifth one is our anti-racism working group report. So that's something that obviously with the release of Alan Shepard's, the task force that was created and then the subsequent response that came out a few weeks ago, we're obviously committed to working alongside them to ensure those are coming true, and then if there's any additional follow-up that's wanted, that's going to happen. And that's kind of in conjunction with point 7. Point 7 was we'd worked to have some of the meetings set up. The BSA was able to get many seats with them very early on, but we made it very clear that if there's ever anything we can do to set up any other senior and mid meetings with some of our contacts, it makes it, we offered that as a standing offer to anyone who from any of the ethnocultural clubs that would desire it. And then one that I like to highlight too is the 6th point. So that's regarding our USC cultural clubs roundtable. It's something that we think is a great step, and it's designed to be at the end of the summer. It's something that we do want to do ongoing throughout the year, but we're particularly excited about this opportunity because it will provide a really good sounding board to understand how we've been doing through the summer, and then how we can also then increase and change our efforts throughout the fall, and also establish kind of the norms of how often we want to meet and how we want to carry on from there. So we think that's a great way to kind of check our efforts and make sure that we're continually being held accountable and that we're not becoming complacent in any way. So with that said, and I know I went through those, obviously there's much more detail than I provided there, but as I said, in light of time, but I want to stop here and ensure that if there are any questions or clarification that's needed from me or any of the other vice presidents that are mentioned, and obviously when even though there's one that are more directly, everyone is working on this quite closely. So yeah, so I just want to leave it there if there's any points of question or concern. Okay.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yeah, great. Go for it.
Councilor Balchan. Excuse me. So when it comes to the orientation week programming and what's being implemented, I've heard and I've seen feedback come up in various locations about it. And one of the ones that I found concerning is that and I'm just gonna preface this by saying I've never been a SOF. I don't know how this works, so it's a blind spot to me. But is there any sort of accountability to make sure that people are taking this seriously and not just being present, listening to the lecture, but not paying attention?
And so sorry, Councilor Beltran, if I can just clarify, are you asking like how are ways that we can ensure that people are engaging with the material?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I might let that go to Hannah, as she's obviously been a lot more specific in the planning. But if there's also anything I can speak to after that, I will definitely hop in. But if Hannah's comfortable hopping in, I will turn it to her.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think you've highlighted a really important point that we have been considering very critically in our planning for orientation training this year. That's feedback that I've heard from many students, that this training is important, but also there needs to be accountability measures to ensure that it's really hitting home. So a couple of things I can highlight right now, and I want to stress that we're still in the process of developing our training. So there's certain things that I think will be part of the end result that maybe I can't speak to right now that address that question specifically. But what I will say is usually in our pre-arrival training, and something we're looking to do again this year specifically with the training that we're putting in place, is mandatory testing at the end of our online segments, so that there is some accountability of proof that SOFs have engaged with the training and understand that and understand the content that they've received. And what I'm speaking specifically to is our virtual modules. That being said, we are also looking to understand ways in which we can continue to affirm this training throughout the year in different follow-up modules and things like that. I'm just thinking. I think what's really important to stress is that it's about both the measures we put in place, such as the quizzes and stuff like that, that in our pre-arrival and then our follow-up training and all that stuff. But I also think that taking this seriously is about cultural change within our community and an understanding that these are pressing issues that need to be addressed. So what I just want to stress is that in terms of the logistical training measures that we can put in place to ensure that this is taken seriously, we are taking those steps. However, I recognize that there is a lot more that needs to be done. And I think it is about both a cultural shift within the program, as well as the logistical measures that we're putting in place. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does, because I've heard that feedback, and not just about this, but on other topics as well.
Hi, Counselor Joe Law. Just a follow-up question on O Week, and specifically that law plans its own O Week. I was wondering if there are any synergies that could be like formed, because like if Western's O Week is already undergoing all these training processes, would it be possible for us to connect to you to sort of also offer that training to our, like we call them JPs, but to our JPs?
Yeah, I'm happy to put my email in the chat if you want to email me about this. I believe that the training that's being provided is something that could easily be adapted to other groups that are doing similar orientation style training. So yeah, very happy to connect on this potentially offline if you want to. I can put my email, and if you want to send me an email about this.
Perfect, that'd be great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, I'm just, obviously I can't look around the room and see faces, but I guess I'll kind of put this out last call for any other questions. And when I say last call, I mean for this. Obviously, after Counselor, if there's anything like that, all of our emails are obviously on the website, and maybe even we can all just drop ours in there just as like another reminder of where to reach us. But yeah, obviously you can read through that brief on your own time and go through it in a little more detail if you haven't had the chance already. But we really think that was a great kind of reference point in terms of where we've been, just so we can be very transparent with what we've been doing and where we're kind of heading. But I do want to be very clear that this is by no means the end of the road, and that this is our silver bullet, and that this is all we're going to be doing. We're definitely looking for more ways that we can continually be more active. And that's where, as I mentioned, our inboxes are open. So if there are concerns or ways that you would like to see us operate better, by all means, please do so. So with that said, I'm going to move into just kind of the remainder of my report, acknowledging that I've gone much longer than I think most of our executive reports will be kind of normally, but I just obviously wanted to be very clear and take some a special time for that point. So then for kind of middle three, I'll kind of group them together in the sense of just like how the USC has been basically going since their transition through May with the outgoing with the 2019-2020 team. So there's a lot of work and knowledge transfer and relation transfers that occurred there. But kind of those middle 3 points there are all pertaining to us wanting to set ourselves up properly for the year. And I do think that at times things such as the relationship building and the team building can be overlooked in the sense that people are really excited to just get their hands in and get moving. But I do think there is a lot of merit, and I do hold a lot of belief in the fact that if you kind of set that foundation, it'll serve you wonders throughout the remainder of the year. So I am really proud of the efforts that our team has made to form those foundations with our respective administrators or student leaders or community partners, whether that be MPs, MPPs, anything along those lines. So I think we've done a really, really great effort, and now we're really excited to kind of get moving, and that's where the executive road mapping comes in. That's been a great process of us kind of consolidating and piecing together what our goals are for the year. So then with those three kind of gone through, then the other point I just want to make a quick note on is the USC Foundation, which is it's a separate charitable organization that's been created by former USC presidents. But basically it's an incredible opportunity, and obviously we post the website in the report, so definitely check out their website. But I think it'll be an incredible opportunity for the USC and moving forward for us to work together on further projects. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions for any of the other points that I've made, I'll stop there. And then if not, once we're there, then we'll pass it over to Victoria. So any questions for me there?
Hi, Law Counselor Jenny, Joe. Just wondering for the update, the executive report, is that shareable? Is that something that we can share with our constituents? And also, Western Law also has a Black Law Students Association, and would we also be able to connect them with the Black Students Association, or has there already been a partnership ongoing?
Yeah, so I guess there's the two questions there. So in terms of when you're asking about sharing the, are you referring to that brief that we wrote up?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm totally comfortable with that. That's something that we're proud of, and again, people should be able to see what we've been working on. So I guess that's your answer to the part one. And then your other part was it us fostering a connection between the Black Legal Society and the BSA, or were you asking that has it already been done?
Yeah, I was more so asking if those connections already exist, or if I should bring those opportunities up to the Law Students Association.
So I unfortunately, I'm not sure on whether they've been acquainted or together already. I can definitely work to set up that connection if that helps. But then, yeah, I'm sure you could also just inform the council from the law school to reach out to BSA, and I know I'm sure they'd want to work alongside. So yeah, maybe that's my recommendation. But if there's any way that I can foster that connection or that introduction, I'm more than happy to.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Cool.
Okay.
So I will continue along the PowerPoint then. I think if there's no more questions for Matt. I think for the most part, I'll try and just like keep it pretty general. And then if anyone has any questions, I'm like happy to answer those as well. So over the course of the summer, our executive has been working like tirelessly, I guess, towards a lot of different files, the anti-racism one being one that we've all worked on specifically, but my portfolio has been working a lot on quality of education, affordability, returning to campus, and then this like general like theme and priority of mine for the year is to like really establish what this role is and the portfolio that it will continue to hold once I'm like gone from this role. So I'll kind of start there at the bottom and then I'll loop back up to the other ones. So obviously back in March, we hired our teams. So I'm in the process of setting out my associates and giving them work to do over the summer, as well as road mapping some of the files that I believe this role should take on, and that the creation of this role was kind of intended for this position to take on. So that's been something I've been working on a lot over the summer, as well as going back up to quality of education. Starting with the survey, our goal has been really to connect with students and figure out what we can do for them in order to make their experience in September the best that we possibly can. And so in addressing quality of education, which we know is students' top priority, I'll be sitting on an ad hoc committee of the Vice Provost to give recommendations for some interim policy that will apply to September academics. Specifically, so that they're, taking into consideration the changes that are kind of unavoidable with COVID, as well as the university has made a significant investment of staff in the Center for Teaching and Learning that will be responsible for developing those online courses that you'll likely be taking. And there's different tiers to the support that professors are going to get in that. So all the way from like helping them develop their courses like entirely to giving them resources or like courses or webinars that they can attend in order to be able to develop some things on their own. So there's varying levels of support being given to professors in order to make sure that they're equipped for September, because we also know that, engagement in online learning is also something that's a concern for students. So we want to make sure that professors are also prepared to deliver that education in the fall. With respect to affordability, I'm very happy to see that Jenny's motion passed today. So we will be creating a tuition policy paper to address not only the concerns that we've heard about tuition this year, but also looking to how this might impact student tuition in the future. Also, the USC doesn't have a standing policy on tuition, and our affordability paper is up for review this year anyways. So it's about time that we review student affordability, as well as increase student financial aid. So that comes in the form of scholarships, bursaries, grants, things like that. But also things like Mark will touch on later, changes to the LTC fees, as well as Mackenzie advocating to the government for OSAP changes. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to address the overall accessibility and affordability of education beyond just the tuition piece, but we're also working to gain some more insight and do some more research on the tuition piece specifically. Safe return to campus is also something I've spent a lot of time on this summer. I sit on the Safety and Facilities Management Working Group. So that's a group that's made up of a lot of members of facilities management, some professors, some like students as in like the USC and the Society of Graduate Students, that gives recommendations on how we can equip campus to prepare to have students back in the fall. So this is anything from signage to like stickers on the floors, how classes are going to work, entering and exiting classes. If you saw the other day, the USC had an Instagram story asking for feedback on questions students have with respect to coming back to campus physically. That was something that kind of stemmed from my positions on these committees and really providing them the questions that students have so that we can fill in the knowledge gaps that might exist and make sure that students and staff and faculty and even like parents that are sending their first year students have all the context they need to know that Western's going to be a safe place. That also ties into another committee that I'm representing students on as well, which is a return to campus, or a subset of like returning to campus on education and training specifically. So making sure that professors are understanding how they're supposed to run their classes and explain to students what their role is, but then also disseminating information to students on what their role is and how they can access PPE and other like resources that'll be available on campus. And that's something that hopefully towards the end of the summer we'll be able to turn to you as counselors and representatives of students in your faculties to help us support and communicate to students as well. We want to really generate like some buy-in from students to really believe that like this is a campus that requires everybody to play a role in keeping it safe. So we want students to really understand that, you know, their actions also contribute to like creating a safe space for everyone. So that's something that we're hoping to be able to connect with you probably later in the summer on, but just a heads up that that might be coming your way. As well as something that I've been pushing on the university a lot is to actually communicate with students directly. So we know that over the course of the summer, there have been a couple updates on, you know, the fact that Western's going to do a blended model and some of the changes related to COVID, but I think it's really important that some of the information comes directly from the university and that they're communicating to students. So that's something that we voice to them and something we're trying to help them in like targeting what students need to know and what they should be communicating, but something that I've been pushing on a lot over the last couple weeks. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions, but that's it for me.
Councilor Beltran has a question. I like that you're going over and talking about how we're trying to get more communication and what is going to be expected of the students. What I'm hoping is there any way that we can ask the overall faculty and the professors to communicate to the students? It could be just as simple as just putting out the syllabus earlier, because I'm used to seeing syllabuses coming out first day of class or like that week right before class. But I know right now that people are signing up for classes. There's some anxiety. There's people who are like, I don't know if I should be going back to London because it's a blended class, but I don't know what's going to be expected. Should I even come back to London or not? So I think it'll be useful.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a couple things on that. The first thing that we've been talking about is with, I think stage 2 was the first stage that faculty were allowed back on campus. So the university is still giving them like the resources that they need in terms of like masks and getting them to fill out like health forms to be able to allow them to come back to campus. So they're still in the process of like training and educating all the staff that are coming back that are then like working on setting up those things. So we're helping, that's what those committees are for, is to try and help figure out what information students need so that we can communicate to staff who are and faculty who are developing their own courses so that they can communicate that to students. So that's the first piece that's really important. And then you mentioned something else, but I lost my train of thought. So if you could repeat your question, that would be great.
So, well, I guess there's 2 parts to it. One was getting syllabus out sooner. So then students can review it and make a decision whether or not they're going to take that course, I guess.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I do remember. My apologies. So the second part that I've been voicing on a lot of these committees as well is giving students a better idea of what the academic, not just the academic environment will look like, but the physical environment for campus. So a lot of the questions that came through that Instagram feed were things like, am I going to be able to study on campus? Like, are there going to be like lounge spaces, like think of places like Center Spot or like Mustang Lounge, like places for students to just like sit and exist on campus. And those are factors that will also contribute to students making that decision to come back to London. Like, what are my classes going to look like? And like, do I get to like be on campus, or is it just that I have to do everything out of my apartment or my student house or whatever that looks like? So I totally like resonate with what you're saying, and that's what we've been working on, is trying to get some of these gaps identified, so that as like a communication strategy, we can figure out with the university like what needs to be communicated to students and to professors that can then communicate to students. But I think right now they're still in the first phase of educating professors, and then once professors have the tools to be able, they're also still in the process of developing some of these courses, which is maybe why the syllabus documents are not available yet, but hopefully towards the end of the summer, and like not too close to the beginning of classes, those will be available for students.
All right, perfect.
Counselor Villeneuve, Engineering. So I was just wondering, just in general, if you probably don't know, but it would be really helpful to know as a student if labs are going to have an option to be in class. I know lots of the first years have options to be in class or online, but when I was even looking at registering for my classes, there wasn't really any options for me to be in class. And I was just wondering about how labs, well, you probably don't know this in general, but how labs will be able to be run online, especially with the hands-on learning and stuff like that. So I was just curious if we're going to be getting more information about that, or if you should just be expecting first semester all to be online.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. Labs and some small in-person tutorials are things that are kind of included in that like blended model, like the half of it that would be, or the portion of it that would be in person. So that's something that I think they're still like you said, kind of in the process of developing, but some of the things I've heard on like the labs piece is potentially modifying them so that students can use, if they're not available in person, modifying them so that students can use materials that they already have at home, potentially sending kits home, like depending on the size of the lab, the type of lab, the program, things like that. But I do, from what I understand at this point, do think that like the labs that have to be in person that they can't modify, they will try to do that in person. If it means they have to be in like more sections and smaller sections, then that might be the case. But it's good to know that that is still a gap in like your knowledge as a student, and that needs to be better communicated by the university. So I totally agree with you that they should be giving you that information when you're enrolling in these courses that are saying you have mandatory labs. So that's something I can bring back to some of these committees that I'm on and make sure that that's addressed in the coming weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I don't know if there are more questions.
Hi, Counselor Joe Law. A question about tuition. My account just came back with my tuition information, and in the ancillary fee section, there's fees for the campus recreation and the athletics. So I was just wondering, depending on all those things, when will we hear from the university about those charges and whether or not we can opt out?
Mark can probably speak a little bit more to this, but what I will say about it is the recent announcement of phase 3, I think, changes what the university is like able to provide. So I'm not sure, maybe I'll let Mark just like take this from here, but I know they're in a position now where what they've planned for up until this point has now has the opportunity to change because of the stage 3 reopening. So Mark, if you want to speak a little bit more to this, I think that's probably better. You have more information on this than I do.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. I think the big thing for this, like campus rec was I think a big question comes up a lot. So the first thing I'll say is like there's 2 different fees in campus rec. So there's the one we levy, which is the actual building fee, which you'll see comes across in the last few years of your tuition bill, but there's also the actual campus membership. They're looking to charge both because they do believe it's going to be open. There's actually, I think, I was talking to the university about this, and a lot of their fees, they're planning on having a set date for like kind of almost a cutoff into August, where they'll be setting like if it's not going to be available, they're not going to charge it, because I believe it's August 17th is when actual tuition and ancillary fees are due. So I would set that like a beginning of August date is when they're going to set, if anything's available, it'll be charged in their fee bill, but if it's not available, they won't charge it. And they've been very straight up about that. So that's why that is still on your fee bill.
Thank you.
Okay, if there is
Sorry,
no more
can I ask
questions.
one more question? Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, there was just a long pause.
No, that's okay. Sorry to interrupt. Counselor Villeneuve again. So is it generally just supposed to be that every student returns to campus in the fall, just in case that there might be a lab or something like that in person, or will we have information of that prior, or is there going to be options for students to be able to do completely online? I'm just so I can tell my fellow classmates and stuff like that, because I know lots of people have been confused, but as long as we know before classes start, I think it'll be okay. But if anyone has any knowledge about if you'll be able to do everything online, or if it's going to be able to, you have to be present in London.
Yeah, that's a really good question as well, and that's kind of what we're wanting the university to better communicate to students is like what the blended model actually looks like. But based on when you selected your courses, I know the registrar's office made it available to you when you picked your courses, that they showed whether the class was going to be online or in person. And essentially, if the class was listed as an online class, whether or not, like, say the virus gets better and like maybe they want to put like some in-person components, they have to continue to offer that class online. So if you've selected all online courses for the next year, regardless of whether or not things get better and things go in person, you can be confirmed in the fact that your classes will be online for the entire year. With respect to the things that are listed as like in-person components, I know a lot of courses would give options for tutorials where you could opt to have an in-person tutorial or an online tutorial. So if you either chose to have an in-person tutorial, then you would have to come back to London. And what I'm not clear on is if it's mandatory. From what I understand, if it's listed as like, say you have to take a course and it has a lab and the lab is listed as in person, then that would require you to be in person. Although I know the university is compassionate to students who are not, comfortable coming back due to like health reasons or whatever that might be. So if you have like all your courses online and you have one lab that like has a mandatory like in person, or it says it's in person, I would encourage you to reach out to the professor of that course, to the dean of your faculty, like the academic dean, and say like, look, listen, I have all my courses online except for this one lab, like, and then explain your circumstance. But from what I understand, if it's been, directed as it's going to be an online course, then they will offer that as an online course the whole year, regardless of like the blended model. But if it does say that it's going to be in person, then you would have to like go to it in person. But at this point, you shouldn't have to like guess whether or not you have to come back to London, because your courses, when you registered, should have said whether or not they were online.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
If there's no more questions, I'll give my update, but I just want to give a warning. Okay, so my name is Mackenzie. For those of you who don't know, I'm the Vice President, External Affairs of Westerns USC, and here is a little bit of what I have been up to since coming into this job in May. One of the major files we've been working on is transit. So the USC sent a letter to our provincial and federal ministers about transit funding for municipalities. And actually yesterday, a dedicated stream of funding for transit was announced by the federal government. So we're really excited to have a win on that file. And just a little bit of context why it was so important is because students do obviously use transit. Most students have a bus pass. And because transit was unable to collect the fee because of the of the bus boarding because of COVID. They were losing a lot of money, and municipalities aren't allowed to take on deficits. So if they lose money and they're not allowed to borrow money, then what happens is they just decrease services, which is really bad because we've been trying to advocate for better routes for years and years and years, and we didn't want to move backwards. So that's why we asked for this funding, and we are really excited to see this funding come municipally. One of the other things that I've been working on is student affordability, reaching out to the government for different ways to support students. Last month, we spoke to the House of Commons, and we, I mean me and President Reeser, spoke to the House of Commons Committee on Human Resource Skill and Social Development and the status of persons with disabilities. We talked about international students and how they could be better supported, and advocated for more funding for students, things like extensions of the CESB that we thought would greatly benefit our students. So we have been flagging these concerns to the government for the past several months. One of the other two things that I've been working on as well are through my positions in external advocacy organizations. So I am currently the Vice President of Finance of USA, which is the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. We've been doing some OSAP advocacy recently because the calculator was not accurate. So we've been in contact with the Minister of Colleges and Universities about how much money that they are eligible for, and then it matches up with the actual amount of money that they receive. I've also done USA's budgeting process, so I had to review their company budget and make sure that it worked for our board for this year. And we're also beginning to start policy paper consultations, so stay tuned for those. There will be one round happening in the next month or so, as well as some other consultations happening later in the first semester. And one of the other things that I've been working on is through UCRU, which is Universities of Canadian Research Intensive Universities. I'm currently the chair of UCRU, so we've been doing a lot of work. UCRU also sent in a transit advocacy letter, similar to what the USC did on our own. We've been working on some COVID-19 advocacy, continuing to flag issues that we see come up for students to the government, and we're currently working on budget submissions to the government, things like making sure that we continue the increase that happened. So recently, Canada Student Grants was increased to a cap of $6,000 for full-time students and $3,600 for part-time students. And we're asking the government to include those raises in the next budget cycle, and a couple other promises that will be announced soon on our UCRU website, so stay tuned. And one of the other things that I am starting to work on is I'm an author of an USA policy paper. I'm authoring Housing, Transit, and Community Development, which is coming in fall 2020, so watch out for that and the consultations that will be coming for those papers soon. So that's everything I've been doing, and while I answer questions, I'm just going to turn my camera off because when my camera's on, the audio lags. But if anybody has any questions, let me know, and I'm more than happy to answer them.
I had a question. I was
sure.
going to talk a little bit more on the OSAP issue you were just mentioning.
Yeah, so one of the things that we found with OSAP was that the calculator that students use before they apply was not accurate. In this calculator, it's used to kind of figure out how much OSAP you'll be eligible for once you apply. And we had an issue flagged for students that this number was really inaccurate. You could put in the same data twice and you would get wildly different predictions in the thousands of dollars, discrepancies in the amount of either grants or loan funding that you would receive. So we flagged with the government and worked with them to make sure students were able to accurately plan for how much financial assistance they would be receiving for the school year.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm gonna give it a 5-second pause just for anyone to interject. Okay, perfect. I can get started then. So I think what you will see here is that the way my time has really been spent this summer has been divided mainly between orientation, reimagining all of our programming and services, as well as building and onboarding my portfolio, which includes 22 associates and coordinators who are responsible for different services and programs at the USC. To begin with OWEEK, I think I'm really happy that there's been a lot of discussion and questions on the changes that have been happening both to the budget and in terms of anti-Black racism and addressing equity, diversity, and inclusion issues in the orientation program. I want to begin by addressing COVID scenario planning. It is a very different year for the orientation program, as I'm sure that's not a surprise given the COVID landscape. That being said, the Orientation Advisory Committee, which is the highest policy body within orientation, has approved and committed to a universally accessible orientation experience, meaning virtual programming, to be augmented with in-person experiences where it is possible and safe to do so. So that has been the direction that we've been moving towards in our planning. And I think that's representative of the budget changes we discussed earlier, in that we have had to shift away from main stage concert programming to alternative programming that allows for safer measures within the orientation program in terms of our events and how we engage students, both virtually and in person. In terms of addressing anti-Black racism and equity, diversity, and inclusion in the orientation program, I think this is a very important time for us to reflect on our programs, practices, traditions that exist within the program. And we had some really, really important, really critical conversations about addressing and reflecting on the program, but also how we move forward, both within the short term, and I want to stress as well within long-term sustainable changes. So the one thing I want to flag that I think is really important and has set the stage for how we address these changes within this orientation week is a motion that was passed through the Orientation Advisory Body on June 10th. And that motion reads, be it resolved that the Orientation Advisory Board commit to the inclusion of anti-Black racism and equity, diversity, and inclusion training for orientation leaders and the execution of programming and education with a focus on addressing anti-Black racism and EDI issues for first-year students for the 2020-2021 orientation week. So I think what's important to stress in this is that you will be seeing some significant changes within our training that we provide to orientation leaders, but you will also see changes within our programming to ensure that we are addressing anti-Black racism as well as EDI throughout our programming within Orientation Week itself. I'm going to move along to reimagining programming. We've been adapting to the COVID limitations that exist, and what my priority is working with my team is that we are ensuring that we are providing the best quality programs and services, keeping in mind health and safety and the restrictions that exist, but that quality of experience does not change because of the limitations. So we've been working on a lot of creative solutions. We're also working very closely with university senior admin to understand the landscape and understand what is allowed. And so that has been a very intense process of reassessing how this looks. And I think it's important to stress that we are not looking to provide like the same experience that has always existed within virtual confines. We're looking to find really creative solutions that address the core of what is important in student experience. So finding different ways to ensure peer-to-peer connections, creating community, all those things that I think are very important to the value of programming in contributing to the student experience. So I look forward to be able to provide you with more updates as we find and come to more concrete conclusions. As well, for the student support and programming portfolio, so as I said in my introduction, we have been doing a lot of transition work with our associates and coordinators, which has been a great process to be a part of. But more importantly, this is my time for a shameless plug, which I think you will all start to become used to. Hiring. We are hiring over 100 student leadership positions for all of our programs and services within the USC Student Support and Programming portfolio right now. So I just shared a link to all the opportunities that are listed on our website, but there are 15 committees within the not within the orientation program, but within the USC that are currently hiring for so many different positions. And what's really important is that we're getting the word out to students so that they know that these positions exist and that they know that there are so many different touch points to get involved with the USC and have their voices heard within our committees and programs. So what I will ask now is that I shared in the council group a link to our post. I'd ask that you all share it on your personal feeds if you feel comfortable. I think it's really important that you're communicating with your constituents these opportunities, and as well to those of you who have some say or control over your faculty council, affiliate council, social medias. It would be great if you can promote those opportunities as well, as applications do close on June 22nd, which is Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. And I would love to see a lot of really strong applicants from all over campus. So with that, I'm very happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Awesome. I'll jump in now if there's no other questions. Yeah, I'll probably just quickly go over a few points because obviously you've all seen my orientation week budget updates and the committee restructuring as well. So I'll just quickly go over a health and dental plan. It's fairly broad in where we're at right now. I think we're almost into a point of implementation, but just to give you a heads up, we had gone through the process of an RFP and switching our insurance providers and become our own health and dental care providers. We were originally part of a campus trust, which had 13 different schools, and we didn't think it was as feasible for us anymore, and we didn't have as much say in how it was going. So we switched over to our own plan. It's been going well. I'll probably have like a bit more of an update about it for September specifically. And I'll have obviously the representatives come for that meeting as well. But just a heads up, we're rebranding as Purple Care. We've also negotiated for international student coverage, and there's also a lowered fee. And we also included a health and wellness platform that we'll have a bit more rollout later on. But we're working in conjunction, hopefully, with the university right now. But obviously on our own merits within the health and dental plan that allows all students to access a mental health platform with specific resources and testing that goes along with some of the points that Matt and Victoria have in both their platforms as well. So I'll jump down to club support. Club support, obviously a big part of my planning has been club support because we're not sure what it's going to look like. We just announced that it's going to be an online clubs week and online clubs training. Certain financial literacy is obviously a priority for moving into that training aspect of it because clubs just don't know what they're doing and how the event's going to happen this year. And I'm obviously working with Hannah on that side from her programming aspect. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on was the transit addendum. Vic had quickly mentioned it at the very beginning. But what we're working right now, we're working with the LTC. Nothing has been completely finalized yet, so I just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with it. But it's looking like any students that are not coming to campus will not be charged LTC pass, which is different than what we had in previous years. But that's just an update from that end. I'll have a bit more specifics once it's all gone through and obviously working with the register on that end. But we still need to go through a bit of logistics on that side of things. But I wanted to give everybody an update and open to any questions you might have about any of this items, clubs, health and dental.
Councilor Beltran, when it comes to the transit part that you just mentioned, is that pretty much said and done in terms of negotiation with London Transit and it just has to be worked out at the university level? Or is there still a possibility that this might fall through?
This is pretty well said and done. We've signed and returned the contract. It's still, the issue is we're working with 3 partners right now. We're working with SOGS, who had just reelected a new president, and we're also working with Fanshawe as well. So there's a bit of it's also a communication thing, but our specific agreement with LTC is gone through. We're just working with those 2 groups. That's why I didn't want to put anything really in stone yet, just because it still has a few contract addendums inside of it.
Okay, so what I can ask is are we free to go ahead and just mention that then to our respective councils?
Yeah, for sure. I would say you're welcome to say we've negotiated a new addendum contract and that any students not coming to campus who are fully online will not be charged the bus pass.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Are there any more questions for Mark? Okay, sweet. I'll jump in here. I'll keep it pretty short, but just a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. So one of our main focuses for the past couple of months has been really making sure that we're listening to students and amplifying student voices. So like Mackenzie mentioned earlier, we drafted a letter of support for the London Transit, and we've gotten and secured funding from the provincial and the federal government for transit in London and making sure that we're really supporting the municipality. And then we've also spoken with the House of Commons Humor Committee, and Matt and Mac touched on affordability, international students, and bolstering supports for international students, which we also saw some policy changes for this week, as well as work integrated learning and making sure that students are having their education also supplemented by hands-on learning and being able to really engage with the course material in a hands-on way. We've also done some engagements with the media. We spoke with the Gazette about fall programming in the COVID-19 era, as well as CTV London and CTV National about student concerns moving into the school year. So I know that Victoria highlighted affordability as a major concern for students, as well as quality of education and social connectedness, which is really reflected in the data that we gathered from our COVID-19 student survey. We've also been working to address racism on our campus, and I know that Matt has touched on a lot of those things in his update, so you guys can look at his update and you guys can also look at the brief, but the statements are out on our website, and happy to chat about any feedback that you guys might have on those. And the last thing that we've been doing is really making sure that we're connecting with our students on projects that are happening this summer. So a health and dental communications plan, and making sure that we're branding Purple Care and ensuring that students know that the USC is providing them with a health and dental plan, as well as the wellness resource that they can access throughout the year. We're also doing a lot of engagement with incoming students, so making sure that they know what they pack, who they should speak to, how they move in, and really maintaining safety as we move into as they move into residence in the COVID age. We're also working on bolstering the USC social media presence. We've made a couple of changes to the way that we communicate with our students on various platforms. Particularly Twitter has been a big one for us, and ensuring that we're reaching out to like our political stakeholders and making sure that we're voicing our advocacy concerns on Twitter. Additionally, we've been working on making sure that our video content is being housed on YouTube, and making sure that we're putting out content that's helpful to students. So for example, how-to videos and informing students on how they can advocate, how they can plan an event, and supporting them in their goals. And the last thing that I've been working on pretty closely is transitioning my coordinators and associates. So one of my associates is actually on this call. Calista is my associate communications, and Haley Lee is my associate public affairs. So we've been working on transitioning them into their roles and making sure that they have the resources that they need to succeed this year. And if you guys ever have any communications and public affairs questions, they might be somebody that's going to be able to support you. So yeah, just making sure that they're transitioned into their roles. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I'm just switching over to the slideshow again. Okay, next up we have the report from the Board of Directors Chairperson.
Hello, everybody. That would be me. Thank you for coming out, and I know taking time out of your Sunday can be a little troublesome at times, but thank you for dedicating your time to the USC. First thing, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Sebastian. I'm the current chair of the USC Board of Directors. I also want to take a little bit of time. I'll keep it brief, but I want to take a little bit of time to kind of explain what the board does. I think a lot of times we kind of operate in the shadows, but I really want council to be very connected to the board this year, so I'll take a little time to do that. Essentially, what the board of directors does, we oversee the corporate side of the USC. So obviously the USC is the whole advocacy side, but as well we operate the UCC, we operate the Spoke, the Wave, all those little services that make the student experience so good. So the best way to think about it, I think, is the board takes care of kind of that corporate side, so that you as counselors can focus your energies on your very important democratic mandate of advocating for students. Some of the key areas and things that we do, we scrutinize the budgets. We ensure that we're keeping track of any financial or reputational or any organizational risk that might affect the USC. And most importantly, I think we really ensure there's good stewardship over our resources, and that as we grow as an organization, we still maintain a line to our mission and organizational values. In terms of who we work very closely with the Chief Operating Officer and the senior management team, as well as President Research, who sits as a voting member of the board, and PPGF St. Pierre, who is also on the board as a non-voting resource member. In terms of how I think I can serve you as counselors, I'm a resource in terms of corporate matters, and I can provide you a corporate perspective of any debate you're having. And as well, I think it's important to note that the board doesn't answer to management, and the board doesn't answer to executives. The board answers to our shareholders or our members in a nonprofit kind of arena, which would be you as counselors. So if you ever need an objective kind of corporate view in any matter, that's the kind of thing that I can provide, and I will provide you with reports of just how the USC is doing as an organization from a corporate perspective. Okay, so with that being said, I'll kind of move into the more substantial report. We've had a very busy summer as the board. We usually meet like 1 or 2 times. We've met like 4 or 5 times this year. Obviously, there's been a lot of challenges with COVID and overseeing that transition, ensuring that we're doing well from a corporate perspective. And our priorities really have been making sure that our staff remain safe, but that as well as a corporation, we can remain financially viable. So that's what the board has been up to this summer. I would like to say that financially, we are in a strong position. I think we're well positioned for the year ahead and for the challenges that might come from it. I want to stress that this isn't by chance. This has been the result of really good management, both from our regular staff and our executive, which has really stepped up. The board feels pretty confident. I would say cautiously optimistic as well about the year ahead. Just from a corporate perspective, we're very sound financially, and we have a really great executive and management team that, again, has really risen up to these challenges. They deserve kind of commendation on that end. But yeah, we feel good, at least from an organizational perspective, about how we've handled COVID and how we will continue to handle COVID. A pretty strong point that I think is something we're all proud of at the board, and I think executive is proud of as well. We've been able to avoid layoffs and keep everybody on staff. Our team worked really hard to ensure that we qualified for the emergency wage subsidy. And as well, we've transitioned into work from home very quickly and very effectively. So we've been able to pass those policies really, really quickly and ensure that our staff is well supported and able to succeed in this kind of new environment that has been, a test for everybody. As well, one of the biggest risks the corporation kind of faces on a year-to-year basis is the high turnover we have, especially in the executive roles. And so transition is always a very important piece. And I think the board as a whole was worried about how transition might turn out, not being able to do it in person. But I think the board is quite confident of how well both the incoming and the outgoing executive stepped up to ensure that that institutional memory has been kept. We were updated throughout the summer, and we're very confident that this team is really armed to take on any challenges that come this year and to effectively manage the corporation. To end it off in a more positive note, I would like to report back on the Student Relief Fund. If you will recall to our last council meeting, council approved $150,000 towards the Student Relief Fund. And you tasked the board with overseeing the disbursal of these funds. We got a letter very recently. I think Matt can speak to this maybe later, but it was a very successful initiative. There was over $2.6 million that were awarded to around 3,300 students across the university to receive financial support for any hardships they might experience over COVID. So that was a big success, and I'm just reporting back to that initiative that he tasked the board with overseeing. And I also like to mention this because, again, it's something that council took a lead on, but as well, this was something that touched every part of the organization, and I mentioned this in the board as well, but it touched the board, exec, management, pretty much everybody in council, everybody who's involved. And I think it speaks to how strong we are as an organization, that we were able to do something kind of so big, so quickly, and so well. We really were able to mobilize in a really, really positive way. And when you look at markers of how well the USC is kind of operating as an organization, I think this is an example of really, really good stewardship. In terms of the year ahead, we're still trying to understand the operational challenges that COVID may face, but we're ensuring that executive and management have good, strong plans in place to for any different scenarios or to come up with anything that might happen. So yeah, the board feels confident about where we are, and I'll take any questions either about the board's role or about the report.
All right, thank you very much. All right, sorry. Next up, we have our Governance and Finance Standing Committee report.
Yeah, perfect. So obviously I'm the chair of the Governance and Finance Standing Committee. We brought forward the 3 motions you saw today with the orientation budget, the change to the council accountability procedure, and the change in standing committees, how the motions are allocated. So we debated those, had some great conversations with everybody. Also, we reviewed the executive financials, which is something we do every month. In case you didn't know, that's something that happens that Mark brings every month to Governance and Finance for us to just review that and make sure everything's on track. Also, we decided when we're going to be hosting our meetings. We're thinking the Wednesday before main council meetings at 7 p.m. on each council cycle. So I'd strongly encourage you guys to, just along with everybody else, to attend other standing committee meetings. If you're on a different standing committee, go to Governance and Finance. If you're on Governance and Finance, go to another one, just so you can get that sense and, be part of that conversation. So we'll make sure we post our meetings in the council Facebook group. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have advocacy.
I think that's going to be me because Harrison is not here, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I didn't see him. Thanks, Councillor Lee.
So, very similar to Governance and Finance, we brought forward the 3 motions that we saw later in the meeting today. So we reviewed and debated those. Had some really great conversation around that. I will be messaging the other chairs and vice chairs of the advocacy committee so that we don't schedule our meetings at the same time, because we were also going to do Wednesdays at 7. But we will figure something out so that we can obviously go to as many meetings as possible, just so we have all that information available for students. But yeah, I think we're looking forward to, working through some of the changes that came today, especially with, like the structuring of internal versus external advocacy. So that's going to be a fun adventure, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of this year. So yay.
All right, thank you. And next up, we have student experience.
Hi, I'm Councillor Chazik, Chair of the Student Experience Standing Committee. So we haven't submitted any motions yet, but we've mostly been getting our footing, and now we're going to be restarting getting our footing upcoming. So I'll definitely reach out to the External Advocacy Committee and everyone else as well to start, pardon me, to start kind of fresh. Hopefully by our next meeting, we'll have our standing committees all set, and we'll have something more to bring forward from the Student Experience Standing Committee.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Oh, sorry, I can screen share this slideshow. Okay, so next up is for discussion. We didn't have any discussion items, so we can move on to new business. Are there any new business items? Okay, if there is no new business items, I'll be looking for a mover to terminate.
Oh, wait.
I can do it. I move it.
Wait, sorry, Megan. Can I add something really quickly?
Yeah, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, I messaged Melissa about doing this earlier. Just so you know, I'm the CAMS Associate Communications. I just wanted to get a Zoom photo of the meeting to use on the press release for the council press release, which will be dropping soon, because we don't have any council photos that we can use with all of you in it. So if we can take 2 seconds for everyone to put on their camera, and I'll take a couple of Zoom shots, and then we can make sure we have a photo. All right.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, 1 sec. I'm struggling here with the.
If everyone, oh, there we go. I was going to say we can also do it after we terminate, if whatever's easiest.
Oh, okay. Sorry, that's where I wasn't sure. Sorry, I should have messaged you earlier, but then it just went really quick.
It looks like everyone is turning their camera or their video on. So if you want to go ahead and take those screenshots, you are good to go.
Okay, I think I got one. Okay, 1 second.
I know we're on 2 screens as well. So.
All right. Okay, I just want to make sure it took it. 1 second. Okay, perfect. I got the first one, so we're gonna get the second one. All right, keep smiling. Okay, I think I got it. All right, thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any new business items? Okay, if there is no new business items, then I'll be looking for a mover to terminate.
I can move it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bennett. And can I get a seconder?
Councillor Ali.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for coming, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Enjoy your Sundays, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.